You walked into that dealership absolutely certain you were being robbed. You weren't. And these 71 complaints are the proof. 1. The sticker price is what you're actually supposed to pay. That's the conviction you carried through the showroom doors like a laminated legal document, treating the number on the window as if Congress had passed it into law sometime between breakfast and your arrival. Here's the part they never bothered to teach you. MSRP stands for Manufacturer's Suggested Retail Price, and the operative word in that phrase has always been suggested, which carries exactly the same legal force as your uncle suggesting you try a new restaurant. The Monroney Act of 1958 introduced the window sticker specifically to give consumers a baseline reference point for negotiation. Not a finish line, not a federal mandate, a starting point for a conversation you were always supposed to have. Dealers are independent franchisees who set their own final transaction prices within legal limits, which is why the person across the desk from you has the authority to move that number and has been doing so every single day since the dealership opened. Industry data from normalized market conditions consistently shows new cars selling 5 to 6% below sticker on average, because buyers who understand the system negotiate and buyers who don't pay full price and then post angry reviews about it online. The invoice price, what the dealer nominally paid the manufacturer, is publicly available on Edmunds and TrueCar, and even that figure isn't the dealer's true cost once you factor in holdback payments, which are manufacturer rebates of roughly 2 to 3% of MSRP paid back to the dealer every quarter. The entire architecture of retail automotive sales was designed around the expectation that you would push back. Getting outraged that the dealer won't honor MSRP as a hard ceiling is like getting furious at a flea market vendor for not charging more than the tag says. The system was built for negotiation, you just never read the manual. 2. The dealer added worthless fees just to steal from you. That's the story you told yourself on the drive home, reconstructing every line item on that contract as evidence of a criminal enterprise operating in plain sight behind a showroom full of new car smell. The actual story is considerably less cinematic. Documentation fees cover the legally required paperwork for title transfer, registration, and DMV filings, and every state in the country allows them. California caps them at $85, while other states permit up to several hundred. But the fee exists because the legal processing of a vehicle transaction generates real administrative work that someone has to do. Destination and delivery charges are set by the manufacturer, not the dealer, which means they appear on every single vehicle of that model sold anywhere in the country regardless of which dealership you walked into, and the dealer has exactly zero ability to waive them on your behalf. Dealer prep fees covering washing, inspection, and fluid top-offs represent legitimate labor costs and are generally negotiable if you ask instead of signing. The Federal Trade Commission requires dealers to disclose all fees in writing before you sign anything, which means the information was available to you at every stage of the transaction. A Consumer Reports study from 2020 found that 85% of car buyers who felt cheated by fees had not requested an itemized out-the-door price quote before arriving at the dealership, meaning the single step that would have prevented the entire experience was available, free, and simply not taken. The solution has always been the same. Email the dealer before you visit and request a complete out-the-door price breakdown. That one email eliminates virtually every surprise fee complaint in existence. Complaining about fees you never asked about is like ordering everything on the menu, skipping the bill entirely, then screaming fraud when the server brings a check. The information was always available, you just didn't want to do the homework. 3. They refused to take your offer, and that's illegal. This is the position you arrived at approximately 45 seconds after hearing the word no. At which point the negotiation apparently transformed in your mind from a commercial interaction into a civil rights violation requiring immediate legal intervention. No business in the United States, or in virtually any functioning economy on the planet, is legally obligated to accept any offer from any customer, and car dealerships are not the exotic exception to this universal commercial reality. Contract law requires mutual agreement, which means the seller has the absolute right to reject any offer, issue a counteroffer, or walk away entirely for any reason that doesn't involve federally protected discrimination categories like race, religion, national origin, or disability. The MSRP displayed on that window is what contract law calls an invitation to treat, not a binding offer, which means seeing a price posted does not compel the seller to complete a transaction at that price with any buyer who shows up. The Karen Classic declaration that you have to sell it to me at that price because it was advertised has legal weight only when an ad contains a specific, unambiguous price commitment with no disclaimers. And dealer advertisements almost universally include language directing you to see the dealer for final details. The FTC's used car rule and the various state limit laws that consumer advocates correctly cite govern disclosure and condition. They say nothing about a dealer's right to decline a price negotiation. Dealers turn down below-cost offers on high-demand vehicles regularly, and the National Automobile Dealers Association explicitly educates its members on their legal right to decline any transaction. Declaring it illegal for a dealership to say no to your low-ball offer is the commercial equivalent of declaring it illegal for a restaurant to tell you a dish is unavailable. Wanting something badly has never, in the history of commerce, been a binding legal instrument. It isn't starting today. 4. They wouldn't let you test drive it for 2 hours, which obviously means they're hiding something catastrophic beneath that fresh wax job. Because what other possible explanation exists for a business declining to hand the keys of an uninsured inventory asset to a stranger for an unsupervised multi-state excursion? Dealership demo vehicles are uninsured in the conventional sense, meaning if you wrap one around a utility pole during your extended evaluation period, the dealership's floor plan insurance bears the financial consequence, not your personal auto policy. Theft of test drive vehicles is a documented recurring problem. The NADA reports hundreds of test drive vehicle thefts annually across the country, which is precisely why most dealers require a photocopy of your driver's license and proof of insurance before you leave the lot with anything. The standard industry test drive runs 10 to 20 minutes with a salesperson present, and it is calibrated to give you everything you actually need. Ride quality assessment, acceleration feel, brake response, cabin noise levels, and technology. Familiarity. Consumer Reports and Edmunds both recommend 15 to 20 minute drives covering city and highway conditions as fully sufficient for purchase decision purposes, which happens to align exactly with what every dealership on earth already offers you. If you have genuine mechanical concerns that extend beyond what a standard test drive reveals, the solution with your name on it is a pre-purchase inspection at an independent shop, a $100 to $150 service that gives you a detailed mechanical assessment without requiring anyone to hand you a $40,000 vehicle for an afternoon. Accusing a dealership of concealing mechanical secrets because they won't surrender the keys for a personal road trip is like accusing a tailor of hiding bad stitching because they won't let you borrow the suit for the weekend. There are legitimate ways to inspect the merchandise thoroughly. The extended joyride was never one of them. 5. The finance guy forced you to buy warranties you didn't want. Forced you, specifically, through some mechanism you haven't fully articulated, but that you are absolutely certain relieved you of any personal responsibility for the documents you signed in that office. The Federal Trade Commission's Credit Practices Rule explicitly prohibits mandatory bundling of any add-on product into financing without full disclosure and the customer's explicit written consent, which means every product presented in that finance office required your signature to appear on your contract. The FI office generates an average of $1,600 to $2,400 in profit per vehicle sold at franchise dealerships according to NADA's most recent financial data, which explains why the presentation is polished, rehearsed, and delivered with the confidence of someone who has had this exact conversation several thousand times. Extended warranties, technically called vehicle service contracts, are regulated insurance products in most states, and their terms, exclusions, and cancellation rights are required to be disclosed in writing before you sign. Every FI product, including extended warranties, gap insurance, and paint sealants, can be declined by writing the word declined and initialing the corresponding line, a process that takes approximately 4 seconds and requires no confrontation whatsoever. Most FI products can also be canceled within 30 to 60 days after purchase for a prorated refund, a right that is disclosed in the contract you received. A J.D. Power study from 2022 found that average FI signing time is under 20 minutes for documents totaling more than 40 pages, which tells you everything you need to know about how carefully most buyers are reading what they sign. Blaming the dealership for warranties you authorized in writing is like blaming a restaurant for the dessert you ordered because the waiter described it enthusiastically. The word no was always on the table. You simply didn't use it. 6. They ran your credit without permission, and that is a crime. A federal offense, a financial invasion, the kind of thing that belongs in a complaint letter addressed to every regulatory body you can name, which you began drafting in your head approximately 30 seconds after learning the inquiry appeared on your report. In virtually every case, the customer signed a credit authorization form, typically embedded in the early paperwork stack, sometimes as a standalone document, before any pull occurred, because dealers cannot legally run your credit without written authorization, and they obtain it before proceeding precisely because the legal requirement is explicit. The Fair Credit Reporting Act requires documented consent for a hard credit inquiry, and dealerships comply by including a credit authorization clause in the purchase agreement, or a separate authorization form that the buyer signs. Here's the part that should genuinely relieve you. Multiple auto loan inquiries within a 14 to 45 day window, depending on the scoring model, are treated as a single inquiry by both FIQ and Vantage Score. The deduplication window was created specifically to protect consumers who shop for the best financing rate, which is exactly what happens when a dealer submits your application to multiple lenders simultaneously. That multi-lender submission isn't a predatory act. It's the mechanism that generates competing offers and typically produces a better rate than a single submission would. A single hard inquiry reduces a FICO score by 5 points or fewer on average, and the impact diminishes within a few months. The CFPB has published consumer guidance explaining the auto loan inquiry deduplication rule, and it has been publicly available for years. Being outraged that a dealership ran your credit after you signed a form authorizing them to run your credit is the documentary equivalent of reporting your own signature as a forgery. The pen was in your hand. You moved it deliberately. 7. Your trade-in is worth way more, and the Kelley Blue Book printout you're gripping says so. That printout you've treated as a certified check from a federal treasury, a document of binding authority that the dealer is legally and morally required to honor, regardless of what their own appraisal tools, auction data, or reconditioning estimates might suggest. Kelley Blue Book states directly on its own website that its values are starting points for negotiation and not offers to purchase, which means the authority you've assigned to that printout exists exclusively in your interpretation of it. KBB lists 4 condition tiers: excellent, good, fair, and poor. And a 2021 IC Car study found that consumers overestimate their trade-in value by an average of 19% compared to actual auction data, largely because most people select good or excellent regardless of what their vehicle's actual condition warrants. Dealers appraise trade-ins based on what they can resell the vehicle for, which means they must account for reconditioning costs, including detailing, mechanical repairs, and safety inspections, plus lot holding costs. Floor plan interest on the trade, while it sits in inventory, and auction fees if the vehicle doesn't sell retail. The tools dealers actually use, Black Book and the Manheim Market Report, are based on live wholesale auction transaction data updated in real time, not consumer surveys conducted on a website. Regional market conditions further complicate any national estimate. A pickup truck commands dramatically different trade values in rural Texas versus urban Massachusetts, regardless of what any national guide publishes. The trade-in range tool KBB introduced specifically to address consumer confusion shows a lower range than private party value because it reflects dealer economics accurately. Walking into a dealership with a KBB printout and demanding they honor it is like walking into a pawn shop with a Zillow estimate and demanding they pay you that for your house. Both are reference tools Neither one has ever written anyone a check. 8. They charged you more than the advertised internet price, and that's bait and switch, a specific federal crime you're now prepared to report based on a price difference created almost entirely by taxes, registration fees, and documentation charges that were disclosed in the fine print you didn't read before making the 3-hour drive. The Federal Trade Commission defines bait and switch as advertising a product with no genuine intention of selling it at that price. It requires deceptive intent as a core element, and typically involves advertising a vehicle that doesn't exist or steering customers away from an available vehicle toward a more expensive alternative. Dealer websites universally include disclaimers noting that advertised prices exclude taxes, title, license, and dealer fees, and those disclaimers satisfy the FTC's disclosure requirements regardless of how inconvenient that fact is for your complaint. The correct consumer move, confirmed without exception by every automotive consumer advocacy organization that has weighed in on this topic, is to email the dealer before visiting and request a full out-the-door price quote on the specific VIN you're interested in. That email takes approximately 90 seconds to write and legally documents the complete cost of the transaction before you invest a single hour of your time or a single dollar of your fuel. California, Florida, and New York have enacted some of the nation's strongest automotive advertising regulations, specifically because consumer complaints about this exact issue drove legislative action, meaning the regulatory response to genuine bait and switch already exists in the states where the problem was most documented. A price difference of $300 to $600 between the advertised price and the final out-the-door total, driven by dock fees and registration, is not a crime. It is the completely predictable, always disclosed arithmetic of every retail auto transaction in America. Calling it bait and switch because you didn't read the asterisk is like calling a restaurant fraudulent because tax and tip weren't included in the menu price. The asterisk was always there. You simply chose not to look for it. 9. The salesperson lied about the MPG and you're suing the individual dealership specifically for the difference between the fuel economy figure printed on the government mandated window sticker and the number your driving habits actually produced in real-world conditions involving your right foot and your daily commute. EPA fuel economy figures have included the disclaimer, actual results will vary since the Energy Policy and Conservation Act of 1975 mandated standardized fuel economy testing and labeling, which means the caveat predates most of the complaints being filed about it by several decades. The EPA's testing methodology uses controlled laboratory driving cycles to produce the combined city and highway figure printed on the sticker, and that figure is a weighted average that doesn't reflect any individual driver's actual commute, terrain, traffic patterns, or mechanical preferences. Real-world fuel economy is directly and measurably influenced by driver behavior. Aggressive acceleration alone reduces fuel economy by 15 to 30% according to Department of Energy data, and highway speeds above 65 miles per hour reduce it by up to 14% independent of any vehicle characteristic. Tire inflation, air conditioning load, cargo weight, and local elevation all produce additional measurable variation, none of which are within the dealer's control, the manufacturer's control, or anyone's control except yours. Several automakers, including Hyundai, Kia, and Ford, have paid regulatory settlements for overstated MPG claims, but those settlements were with the EPA and the FTC, not with individual dealerships, and they resulted in structured owner compensation programs administered at the federal level. The fueleconomy.gov website, operated jointly by the Department of Energy and the EPA, provides real-world MPG data crowdsourced from actual owners of every vehicle, and it was available to you before you purchased. Suing a dealership because your driving habits don't match an EPA laboratory result is like suing a cookbook author because your souffle fell. The estimate assumed controlled conditions. You introduced variables. That is not fraud, that is physics. 10. The dealership's online payment calculator showed you a number and they won't honor it, which you have now upgraded in your mind from a misunderstanding about financial estimation tools to an act of commercial deception that you intend to pursue aggressively. Online payment calculators are estimation utilities, not purchase agreements, and every single one of them carries a legal disclaimer stating that actual payments depend on credit approval, the final negotiated vehicle price, applicable fees, current lender interest rates, and the specific terms of the financing arrangement, none of which are known until the deal is fully structured in the finance office. Payment calculators use assumed inputs to generate illustrative figures, a default interest rate that typically reflects the best available Tier 1 rate, a default loan term, and the listed vehicle price before taxes and fees are added. A customer whose credit profile results in an interest rate 1.5 percentage points above the calculator's assumed rate will see a meaningfully higher monthly payment on a 72-month loan. And that difference has nothing to do with anyone lying to anyone. Actual purchase agreements that bind both parties are executed in the finance office after credit approval, final price negotiation, and trade-in appraisal are all complete. Nothing before that moment carries contractual weight. The single most reliable consumer protection strategy documented by every automotive advocacy organization is to negotiate the out-the-door price first as a complete cash transaction, then discuss financing separately based on that fixed number. This approach eliminates payment manipulation entirely because the total price is already locked before monthly payment math begins. Treating a payment calculator as a binding contract is like treating a calorie counter app as a restaurant receipt. It was an estimate. The disclaimer said so. You preferred the number it generated to the reality the finance office produced. Those are not the same thing, and no one in the building told you they were. 11, the car was listed as like new, but it has 8,000 miles on it, and you are now preparing a false advertising complaint because a subjective marketing descriptor attached to a used vehicle listing did not conform to your personal definition of newness. Like new is what contract law classifies as puffery, a subjective quality claim that communicates condition rather than specification, and courts across every American jurisdiction have consistently upheld its use as non-actionable commercial opinion precisely because no reasonable consumer is expected to interpret it as a factual warranty. The FTC distinguishes between puffery, which is legally protected commercial speech, and actionable misrepresentation, which requires a false statement of objective fact. Like new falls firmly and entirely in the first category, and has never been the basis of a successful consumer fraud claim in automotive retail. Certified pre-owned programs, which are the regulated alternative to subjective condition descriptions, carry specific contractual standards, minimum and maximum mileage thresholds, multi-point inspection requirements, and factory-backed warranty extensions that are disclosed in writing and enforceable. A vehicle with 8,000 miles is, by any reasonable mechanical assessment, in near new condition from a wear and tear perspective. Most mechanical components don't begin producing measurable wear until 10,000 to 15,000 miles of normal operation, and 8,000 miles represents a fraction of any component's expected service life. The buyer's guide, mandated by the FTC on every used vehicle, which you signed, is the binding document. Discloses warranty status and as-is condition in language that is both explicit and legally operative. The marketing copy in the listing headline is not the binding document. It is the marketing copy in the listing headline. Demanding legal action over the phrase, like new, requires ignoring what binding means, what puffery means, and what 8,000 miles means mechanically. That is a significant amount of ignoring to do before filing a complaint. 12, they refuse to sell you a car, and that is discrimination. You've decided this firmly, despite the fact that the deal fell through because your debt-to-income ratio exceeded the lender's threshold, your trade carried more negative equity than the new deal could absorb, and the vehicle you wanted in the specific configuration you required was genuinely not available in their inventory. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act prohibits credit decisions based on race, color, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, age, or receipt of public assistance. It explicitly and deliberately permits declining customers for legitimate financial reasons, including creditworthiness, income verification failures, and deal structure problems that no lender will approve. dealers decline transactions routinely for reasons that have nothing to do with the buyer's identity. Lenders refusing to finance a specific deal structure, negative equity in a trade-in that cannot be resolved within the new vehicle's price ceiling, vehicle unavailability in the requested configuration, or customers requesting terms that fall outside every lender in the dealer's network. Spot delivery rescissions, where a customer takes a car home before financing is finalized and is later informed the deal cannot be funded, are a genuine source of consumer frustration, and they result from financing failure, not discrimination. The CFPB tracks auto lending discrimination and has brought enforcement actions against lenders for systemic rate disparities backed by statistical analysis across thousands of transactions. Individual deal refusals required documented evidence of discriminatory intent, not simply the feeling that the outcome was unfair. Filing a frivolous discrimination complaint when a deal collapsed for financial reasons doesn't just inconvenience the dealership, it consumes regulatory resources that could be applied to investigating documented, systematic lending discrimination backed by actual data. Know the difference between a deal that fell apart and a right that was violated. That difference matters enormously, and conflating the two serves no one. 13. They wouldn't let you record the conversation, and the refusal is proof of active concealment, of illegal pricing practices, of exactly the conspiracy you suspected before you even arrived. 11 states are all-party or two-party consent states under wiretapping statutes: California, Florida, Illinois, Michigan, and several others, where recording a conversation without all parties' consent is a criminal offense, not a civil matter. And a business representative in those states is asserting a legal right when they decline to be recorded, not obstructing an investigation. Businesses in every state have the right to establish recording policies on their private property, and that right exists independently of whether you find it suspicious. Many dealerships explicitly permit recording in their policies and train staff accordingly. A refusal is a business policy decision, not necessarily an indication that anything untoward is happening behind the showroom's closed doors. The practical consumer protection tool that every attorney and consumer advocate recommends is written documentation. Request all offers, counteroffers, and agreed terms in email or printed form, which creates a cleaner legal record than an audio file and is available in every state without triggering consent requirements. Recorded conversations have been used in consumer protection cases, but only when obtained in compliance with applicable consent law. An illegally recorded conversation is generally inadmissible and potentially exposes the person who made it to criminal liability. The FTC and every state attorney general Consumer Protection Division recommends taking notes, requesting written summaries of all terms, and refusing to sign anything not read completely, none of which require a recording device. Assuming a business has something to hide because they decline to be recorded is like assuming a dentist is performing experimental procedures because they asked you not to film the appointment. Privacy policies are legal assertions. They have always been, and they will remain, something other than confessions. 14. Your credit union approved you at 3%, and the dealer should just match it. Match it immediately, without conditions, as a basic courtesy owed to someone who has done their research and arrived prepared, and the failure to do so is obviously evidence of predatory lending targeting consumers who had the audacity to come in with a pre-approval. Dealers are financial intermediaries, not lenders. They connect buyers with financing institutions and cannot arbitrarily generate a rate that their lending partners aren't willing to offer for a specific buyer profile on a specific vehicle at a specific loan-to-value ratio. Franchise dealerships typically maintain relationships with 10 to 20 lending institutions simultaneously and submit applications to multiple lenders at once, generating competing bids that frequently produce better rates than a single pre-approval from a credit union. This is the mechanism working in your favor, and it operates whether you acknowledge it or not. Manufacturer captive finance companies, Ford Motor Credit, Toyota Financial Services, GM Financial, regularly offer below-market promotional rates of 0 to 1.9% APR on specific models as purchase incentives and these subsidized rates are structurally unavailable from a credit union, regardless of your membership status or credit score, because they are funded by the manufacturer's marketing budget. Dealer reserve, the markup a dealer adds to the buy rate offered by a lender, is a legitimate disclosed practice regulated by federal oversight and subject to CFPB enforcement when excessive, but it exists in a system where competition between lenders drives rates down for the buyer. A pre-approval from your credit union is genuine, useful leverage that frequently does result in better terms when presented at the finance desk. The correct move is to present it as a competing offer, not to demand compliance as though the dealer controls what every lender in their network will approve. Demanding a dealer match your credit union's rate is like demanding a travel agent match a price their airline partner doesn't fly. They're working within a network. Sometimes the network wins, sometimes you use the credit union. That is precisely how a functioning market operates. 15. The car broke down 2 weeks after you bought it. The dealer must have known, and you are demanding a full refund under the implied warranty that exists in your understanding of consumer protection law, but does not, in quite that form, exist in the actual law. The FTC's used car rule requires every used vehicle to display a buyer's guide disclosing whether the vehicle is sold as is, meaning no warranty with the buyer accepting the vehicle in its current condition, or with a limited warranty covering specific components for a defined period. You sign that buyer's guide before taking possession, and as is a legal term with specific operational force. It transfers mechanical risk to the buyer at the moment of sale and releases the seller from liability for post-sale failures unless concealment of a known defect can be proven. Concealment of a known material defect is fraud, but the buyer bears the burden of proving the seller knew about the defect and deliberately hid it, which requires evidence beyond the fact that something broke after you drove it home. Lemon laws apply to new vehicles and in some states to used vehicles, but they require a recurring defect that cannot be repaired after a specific number of documented attempts during the warranty period. A single post-sale mechanical failure falls nowhere within that framework. A pre-purchase inspection by an independent mechanic costs between $100 and $150 and identifies existing mechanical issues before the transaction closes, which is why every consumer advocate recommends it without exception. Skipping that inspection and then arguing that the dealer must have known about the subsequent failure is not a legal argument. It is a statement about the choice you made when you decided the inspection wasn't necessary. The form had a name. The name was as is. It meant exactly what it said, and it said it before you signed it. 16. They wouldn't negotiate on a brand new car, and you're certain some unnamed law requires them to. Because the alternative, that a business can simply decline your offer on a product experiencing demand that exceeds available supply, is not a reality you're prepared to accept without regulatory intervention. Dealers have the unconditional legal right to sell any vehicle at any price they choose, including at MSRP or above it, and no federal statute, state regulation, or principle of consumer protection law requires them to discount a vehicle that their inventory position and market conditions don't require them to discount. Market allocation, where high-demand vehicles sell at or above MSRP because the number of buyers exceeds the number of available units, is a normal economic response to supply and demand imbalance, and it occurred extensively across virtually every automotive brand during the semiconductor supply chain crisis of 2021 through 2023, when production shortfalls reduced available new vehicle inventory by an estimated 7.7 million units in the United States alone. Several states, including New York and Florida, passed legislation in 2022, specifically restricting certain above MSRP markups in response to widespread consumer complaints. Legislation that was necessary precisely because the practice was legal, and legislation that is the exception rather than the rule in most of the country. Manufacturer-dealer agreements define what vehicles a franchise can sell and within what geographic territory. They say nothing about requiring the franchise to discount specific units to specific buyers. The alternative to accepting current market pricing is to wait for inventory to normalize, to factory order the vehicle directly through a dealer at a negotiated price. or to choose an equivalent vehicle that has available discount room. Direct-to-consumer brands use fixed, non-negotiable pricing without any possibility of a better deal, and no consumer has accused them of illegality for that model. Insisting a dealer must negotiate because you want them to is the retail equivalent of demanding a sold-out concert ticket at face value. Supply and demand existed before you arrived. It will outlast your complaint. 17. The salesperson was rude, the experience was unpleasant, you didn't get the deal you wanted, and on your way out you announced you'd be filing a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. Announced it with the confidence of someone who believes the BBB is a federal enforcement agency equipped with subpoenas, audit authority, and the power to impose meaningful consequences on businesses that disappoint their customers. The Better Business Bureau was founded in 1912 as a self-regulatory advertising organization, operates on voluntary membership funded by fees paid by the businesses it accredits, and possesses exactly zero regulatory authority over any business in any industry in any state in the country. A BBB complaint triggers the organization contacting the business and requesting a response. That is the complete extent of the enforcement mechanism, and businesses routinely ignore those contacts with no legal consequence whatsoever. ABC News ran an investigative series in 2010 documenting that businesses could pay for high ratings regardless of their complaint history, which raises questions about the organization's credibility as an independent consumer protection resource that its reputation has never fully recovered from. Actual regulatory bodies with genuine investigative and enforcement power include the FTC at the federal level, the CFPB for financing-related complaints, your state attorney general's Consumer Protection Division, and your state's Motor Vehicle Dealer Licensing Board, which has the authority to revoke licenses, impose fines, and mandate restitution following documented violations. Rude behavior by a salesperson, while genuinely unpleasant, is a customer service failure addressable through the dealership's management, ownership escalation, or the manufacturer's customer relations hotline, none of which require the Better Business Bureau. Threatening to call the BBB is the commercial equivalent of threatening to write a strongly worded letter and mail it to a post office box that hasn't been opened since the organization's relevance peaked. It exists. It simply does not do what you think it does, and it has not done so for a very long time. 18. They added paint protection film without telling you. They charged you for it. And now you're on the phone with your state attorney general's office describing the experience as theft, using the word theft, with the specific legal confidence of someone who has not yet looked at the document they signed that lists the charge in plain language on a separately attached sticker. Dealers routinely add accessory packages to inventory vehicles before those vehicles are available for sale. Paint sealant, nitrogen-filled tires, wheel locks, window tint. And these additions are listed on a supplemental market adjustment or dealer-added accessories addendum that is physically attached to the standard Monroney sticker on the vehicle's window. Visible from the parking lots, readable before you enter the building. The FTC requires all charges to appear in the final purchase agreement with the customer's signature, which means the charge cannot legally appear for the first time in the contract without prior disclosure, and if it did, that would be a documentable violation worth reporting. But the disclosure was on the window, and the window was there before the negotiation started. Paint sealant products sold through dealerships are frequently criticized by professional detailing specialists as overpriced relative to their actual protective benefit, and that criticism is entirely fair. But overpriced is a different word than fraudulent, and the distinction matters when you're deciding which regulatory agency to call. Installed accessories like film, sealant, and window tint cannot be removed post-installation without causing damage to the vehicle, which is why dealers treat them as non-negotiable line items. The price, however, is frequently negotiable if you identify it and ask before signing anything. Consumer advocates uniformly recommend reviewing the complete window sticker, including the dealer addendum attached beside the government sticker, before entering the sales office. The addendum is always there. It is always readable. It was there when you walked through the lot. Discovering an add-on in a contract you signed is not theft. It is the entirely predictable consequence of signing a document faster than you read it. 19. You changed your mind after signing, drove the car home, had second thoughts by morning, and now you're standing at the service counter citing the 3-day cooling off rule with the authority of someone who has definitively misread a federal regulation and built an entire return demand on top of that misreading. The FTC's cooling off rule applies to sales made at the buyer's home, workplace, dormitory, or a temporary location rented by the seller. And the FTC's own published consumer guidance explicitly states, in language requiring no legal interpretation, that the rule does not cover vehicles sold at a dealer's permanent location. California, frequently cited as the nation's most consumer protective state, does not have a statutory right to cancel a vehicle purchase contract. It requires dealers to offer a 2-day cancellation option contract for an additional fee, which is a purchased option, not a free legal right, and it is meaningfully different from the unconditional return right you believe you possess. Buyer's remorse is not a legal cause of action in any jurisdiction in the country. Contract law requires mutual agreement to rescind a completed transaction, meaning the dealer must also agree to unwind it, and their agreement is a courtesy, not an obligation. Many dealers will accommodate returns within 24 to 48 hours as a customer service gesture when the vehicle hasn't been titled yet. This happens, it is generous, and it is entirely voluntary. The misconception is so widespread and so persistently wrong that the FTC maintains a dedicated FAQ page specifically addressing the car purchase and cooling off rule misunderstanding, which tells you something about how many people have arrived at a dealership with the same confident and incorrect legal theory you just presented. Demanding a refund on a car because you thought a 3-day rule applied is like demanding a refund on a haircut because you assumed all professional services were reversible. The rule you're thinking of doesn't cover what you used it for. It never did. 20. You want to see the invoice price. You consider it your right as a consumer to review the dealer's internal cost documentation before agreeing to any transaction, and the refusal to produce it confirms your suspicion that the markup is obscene and the operation is fundamentally dishonest. Dealers have no legal obligation to show any customer their factory invoice. It is a private business record exchanged between the manufacturer and the dealer, carrying the same disclosure requirements as the wholesale cost documentation of any retailer in any industry, which is to say none. Even if the invoice were produced, it would not reveal the dealer's true cost, because invoice price and actual cost are not the same number and have never been the same number. Manufacturer holdback, typically 2 to 3% of MSRP paid back to the dealer quarterly, does not appear on the invoice, meaning a dealer selling a vehicle at invoice price may still generate $400 to $900 in holdback income on that unit. Factory to dealer incentives, regional advertising allowances, volume bonuses, and stair-step programs that pay retroactive per unit bonuses when monthly sales targets are hit further widen the gap between the document you want to see and the dealer's actual economics. And none of these appear on the invoice either. Invoice prices for virtually every vehicle on sale in America are publicly available on Edmunds, TrueCar, and Consumer Reports, accessible in under 3 minutes without the dealer's involvement or cooperation. The industry has evolved. Analysts now recommend negotiating from Edmunds' true market value data, which reflects actual transaction prices in your specific market rather than from invoice. Demanding to see a dealer's invoice is like demanding a restaurant show you their food costs spreadsheet before you'll order. The market pricing data is already in your pocket. The dealer's internal paperwork will not tell you anything those tools don't already know. 21. Your extended warranty should cover everything because it says bumper to bumper right there in the marketing materials, and the claims denial you just received is therefore fraudulent, a breach of a promise made explicitly in the brochure that you read more carefully than you read the actual contract. Bumper to bumper is a colloquial marketing phrase with no legal definition and no operative coverage, meaning every vehicle service contract, which is the correct legal term for what the dealer sold you, defines its coverage through a detailed contract document that lists what is covered, what is excluded, what the deductible is, and how long the coverage lasts. The factory bumper-to-bumper warranty on a new vehicle is technically called a basic limited warranty, and it also carries exclusions. The phrase has always been aspirational marketing language, not a comprehensive coverage guarantee, and this was true before you purchased your VSC and remains true now. Common VSC exclusions that surprise buyers include all wear items such as brake pads, belts, hoses, and tires, damage resulting from owner modifications, failures caused by deferred maintenance, and pre-existing conditions identified at inspection. These exclusions are listed in the contract that was available before signing. Aftermarket VSCs purchased through dealerships are frequently administered by third-party companies, not the manufacturer. The dealer collected a commission and has limited influence over the claims administrator's decisions once the contract is in force. The VSC document you signed, typically running 20 to 40 pages, contains the complete coverage and exclusions list, and you had the right to read it before signing and to take it home if you needed more time. Being shocked that bumper to bumper doesn't cover your specific failed component is like being shocked that all you can eat at a buffet excludes the bar. The phrase set an expectation. The contract set the terms. They were never the same document. 22. They registered your car without your personal involvement in the DMV process, and you've characterized this as the dealer processing government documents without authorization. An unauthorized act that somehow bypassed your consent despite your signature appearing on a purchase agreement that explicitly authorized exactly this service. All 50 states allow licensed dealers to process title and registration on behalf of the buyer as a standard component of the vehicle sale, and many states structure their tax collection and DMV compliance systems around the expectation that dealers will handle this processing rather than releasing untitled vehicles to buyers who then navigate the process independently. The purchase agreement you signed includes authorization language for the dealer to process title, registration, and tax payment on your behalf. This clause appears in standard automotive purchase contracts across the industry and has been standard practice for decades. Dealers maintain a surety bond with the state DMV as a condition of their dealer license, and proper title and registration processing is one of the obligations that bond underwrites, meaning the state has already verified that the dealer is authorized to do precisely what you're now objecting to. The processing cost is included in the documentation fee line item you paid, which covers the administrative labor of preparing and submitting the paperwork correctly so you don't have to spend an afternoon at the DMV. Some states give buyers the option to handle their own registration, and in those states, buyers who prefer to manage the process themselves can do so. Most don't, because the dealer's handling of it is one of the few genuine conveniences in the transaction. Being outraged that the dealer handled your registration is like being outraged that the moving company moved your furniture. You hired them. The contract said they would. They did exactly what was described. This outcome required no investigation. 23. The car was described as a one-owner vehicle. The Carfax shows 2 ownership records, and you are now preparing a misrepresentation claim against the dealership based on a number that Carfax generates using a definition of owner that differs meaningfully from the definition you were applying when you interpreted the salesperson's description. Carfax defines an owner as any entity that received a title. This includes leasing companies who hold title during a lease, rental car companies, fleet operators, and dealers who take a vehicle in on trade and retitle it before reselling it. A consumer who leases a vehicle for 3 years, exercises their purchase option, and then trades it in will generate a Carfax record identifying the leasing company and the consumer as 2 separate owners. The vehicle had 1 human driver for its entire life and still shows as 2 Carfax owners because the leasing company held title during the lease term as a matter of standard lease structure. Carfax itself displays an explicit disclaimer stating that its reports may not contain complete vehicle history and that ownership counts may not reflect actual consumer owners. The company that produced the document you're using as evidence has already told you the document has this specific limitation. A title history check at the state DMV, available for a nominal fee, provides the authoritative legal ownership record. Carfax is a private third-party data aggregator drawing from voluntary reporting sources, not a government registry. If the misrepresentation was verbal, proving it requires documentation of what was specifically said, if it was in writing, that written representation is worth examining against the actual title history. Disputing a Carfax owner count without understanding how Carfax counts owners is like disputing a baseball statistic without knowing what the statistic measures. The number means something specific. It has always meant that specific thing, and it was not what you thought it meant. 24, the dealer submitted your application to 6 lenders and you've decided your credit score was destroyed. Obliterated across 6 separate hard inquiries, each one carving permanent damage into your financial profile, all of it the dealer's fault for daring to shop your application to multiple lenders simultaneously in the act of finding you the best available rate. Credit scoring models specifically protect consumers who rate shop for auto loans. FICO score. 8, the most widely used model in automotive lending, treats all auto loan hard inquiries made within a 45-day window as a single inquiry for scoring purposes, and this deduplication window was designed explicitly to encourage the kind of multi-lender shopping that produces better rates for buyers. Older FICO scoring models use a 14-day window, VantageScore uses a 14-day window, and even in the shortest available window, multiple lender submissions made on the same day count as one inquiry. Meaning the scenario you're describing as credit destruction is, in every scoring model currently in use, treated as a single event. A single hard inquiry reduces a FICO score by 5 points or fewer on average, and its impact diminishes within a few months as the account ages. It is among the least significant factors in the scoring model, weighted far below payment history, utilization, and account age. The CFPB and the FTC both publish consumer guidance explaining the auto loan inquiry deduplication rule, and that guidance has been publicly available for years. Dealers submit to multiple lenders simultaneously because competition between lenders produces better rates for the buyer. The practice exists to help you, and the scoring model accommodates it because regulators understood that rate shopping should not carry a penalty. Panicking about multiple auto loan inquiries destroying your credit is like panicking that turning on multiple light switches will overload the grid. The system was engineered for exactly this use case. Multiple applications, one scoring event. That is how it was designed. 25. There's a charge in your contract you don't recognize, and you've decided your signature on that page must have been forged, because you definitely would not have signed something you disagree with, and the only explanation for your signature appearing next to a term you now reject is that someone in that finance office reproduced your handwriting without your knowledge or consent. Modern automotive purchase contracts require a signature or initial on virtually every substantive section: disclosure pages, warranty acknowledgments, financing terms, add-on product selections. And this redundancy exists specifically because "I didn't sign that" is a claim that has been made before and that the documentation structure is designed to address. Many dealerships have transitioned to electronic signature platforms, including DocuSign and Route 1 eSign, that create time-stamped, IP-logged, audit-trailed digital records of every signature event. The forensic record of your authorization is considerably more detailed and durable than a physical signature on paper, and alleging forgery of an electronic signature requires confronting that record directly. Document forgery is a felony in every state. Enforcement mechanisms exist, and documented forgery cases are prosecuted. They are also rare, and they are distinct from a buyer discovering a term they dislike in a contract they signed quickly without reading it completely. The correct process when you find a disputed term is straightforward. Request a copy of the complete signed contract, identify the specific page and clause in question, compare it to what was verbally discussed, and contact the FI manager or dealer principal to address any genuine discrepancy. The most common actual dispute in this category is not forgery. It is a customer who initialed an arbitration clause or an add-on product line without reading it and is now disputing it after the fact. Claiming forgery because you found a term you don't like in a contract covered with your own initials requires evidence of forgery. Your disagreement with the term is not that evidence. 26. You bought a used vehicle and discovered water intrusion evidence afterward. A musty smell, fogged headlights, corrosion in places corrosion doesn't belong, and your conclusion is that the dealer concealed a flood-damaged vehicle in a deliberate act of fraud designed to maximize their margin at your direct expense. flood vehicle concealment does happen, it constitutes genuine fraud, and it is aggressively prosecuted by state attorneys general. This is not a myth, and the concern is legitimate when the evidence supports it. What is a myth is the assumption that any moisture problem automatically proves deliberate pre-sale concealment, because non-flood moisture intrusion develops from multiple sources that have nothing to do with submersion. Failed door seals, cracked windshield gaskets, clogged sunroof drains, and HVAC condensate leaks. All produce interior moisture over time and may not have been present or detectable at the time of the dealer's inspection. Flood titles resulting from declared disaster events are reported to the National Motor Vehicle Title Information System, a federally mandated database that Carfax, AutoCheck, and state DMVs draw from, making the concealment of documented flood events increasingly difficult without a traceable paper trail. A pre-purchase inspection that specifically includes checking moisture levels beneath carpeting, examining VIN plate condition for watermarks, and inspecting the undercarriage for rust patterns inconsistent with age is the consumer tool designed to catch undisclosed flood vehicles before purchase. NMVTS checks are free and publicly accessible at vehiclehistory.gov, and buyers who skip this step before purchase carry a reduced legal standing when claiming the dealer should have disclosed what the federal database would have shown. Assuming every moisture problem proves deliberate flood concealment is like assuming every headache proves poisoning. Sometimes the evidence supports the conclusion, and sometimes the sunroof drain just needed cleaning. Know which situation you are actually in before you file the police report. 27. The window sticker has a line item called a market adjustment, and you want to know which specific law prohibits it, because you are certain one exists and the dealer is simply hoping you won't find it. No such law exists in most of the country because dealers have the unqualified legal right to sell any vehicle at any price the market will support, including prices above MSRP. And suggested in manufacturer's suggested retail price has carried that same operational meaning since the Monroney Act established the sticker requirement in 1958. Above MSRP pricing became widespread during 2021 through 2023 when semiconductor shortages reduced new vehicle production by an estimated 7.7 million units in the United States, creating supply conditions where buyer demand exceeded available inventory across virtually every brand simultaneously. This is economics, not conspiracy. Several states, including New York and Virginia, passed legislation specifically restricting certain above MSRP markups following the volume of consumer complaints generated during the shortage period, and those legislative responses confirm that the practice is legal until a state specifically prohibits it, because you cannot legislate against something already illegal. The market adjustment appears on the dealer addendum sticker attached beside the Monroney sticker on the vehicle's window, disclosed before any negotiation begins. It is not a hidden charge revealed at signing, it is visible in the parking lot. Consumer options when facing a market-adjusted vehicle include waiting for inventory to normalize, placing a factory order through the dealer, which typically eliminates the markup, or choosing a vehicle from less constrained inventory where a discount room exists. Demanding it be illegal for a dealer to charge what the market will bear is demanding we legislate supply and demand out of existence. Economics has been declining that invitation since before either of you arrived at this dealership. Your complaint will not change its position. 28, the test drive car, had coffee rings in the cup holders and a scuff on the door sill, and you've written a review characterizing the dealership as an operation bereft of basic standards. An establishment whose pride in their product has visibly collapsed, evidenced specifically by the condition of a vehicle that dozens of strangers drive every week under conditions the dealership cannot control. A high-traffic dealership may conduct 20 to 50 test drives per week on a single demonstrator vehicle, and cleaning and detailing that vehicle between every drive would require a dedicated full-time detailing employee assigned exclusively to that task, which no dealership operates because the economics of that staffing model are not compatible with running a dealership at any price point. Demo vehicles accumulate the wear of active use, adjusted seat positions, fingerprints on the touchscreen, scuffed door sills from entry and exit, cup holder residue from customers who brought beverages because they are working tools, not display pieces, and this is universally true across every brand and every market in the world. Luxury brand dealerships invest significantly more in demo vehicle presentation standards because customer expectations at that price point justify the additional staffing investment. But even a BMW dealership cannot prevent the marks introduced by the 43rd test driver of the week. The vehicle you are purchasing, as opposed to the vehicle you test drove, goes through a dealer preparation process before delivery that includes washing, vacuuming, glass cleaning, and fluid inspection. The standards applied to your vehicle are different from the standards applied to the community property that every other prospect has been handling all month. Cleanliness is among the top 5 factors in dealership satisfaction scores according to J.D. Power's annual Sales Satisfaction Index. So, dealers who consistently ignore demo vehicle condition do face commercial consequences. Getting outraged at a test drive car for showing evidence of being used is like getting outraged at a hotel gym treadmill for being warm. You were not the first person to use it today. You were never intended to be. 29. You announced you were paying cash and expected to be treated accordingly. Escorted to the front of the line, offered the best available price as a reward for the simplicity you were bringing to the transaction, and the salesperson's visible lack of enthusiasm confirmed your suspicion that the industry has something against people who don't need financing. Cash buyers are genuinely less profitable for dealerships than finance buyers, and this is not a character flaw in the industry. It is the straightforward arithmetic of a business model where the finance office generates $1,600 to $2,400 per financed vehicle according to NADA data, and cash transactions eliminate that revenue entirely while consuming identical sales floor time and overhead. Dealer reserve, the spread between the lender's buy rate and the rate offered to the customer, represents legitimate compensation for arranging financing that a cash transaction makes structurally impossible. Cash transactions over $10,000 trigger bank secrecy. Act compliance requirements. Dealers must file IRS Form 8300, the report of cash payments. Over $10,000, creating administrative overhead that arrives without the financing income that normally accompanies complex paperwork. No federal or state law requires a dealer to accept cash. They can legally require financing as a condition of purchase, though almost none do in practice because that policy would cost them more sales than the financing income is worth. The practical reality is that dealers will sell to cash buyers at the same vehicle price they'd offer a finance buyer. They simply won't reduce it further to compensate for the lost FI opportunity. Expecting to be rewarded for paying cash at a dealership is like expecting a restaurant to comp your meal because you didn't order alcohol. You eliminated their highest margin revenue stream and arrived expecting a discount on everything else. The math has never worked in your favor, and it is not going to start today. 30. The car developed a mechanical problem on day 22, and because 22 is fewer than 30, you've arrived at the dealership with a demand for free repairs based on an implied 30-day warranty you believe exists universally in consumer protection law. No universal 30-day implied warranty on used vehicles exists in federal law. The Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act governs written warranties on consumer products, but does not create an implied warranty on used vehicles sold, as is in states where that designation is legally effective. Approximately 14 states limit or prohibit as-is used car sales, and in those states, Connecticut, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Mississippi, New York, Vermont, and several others, implied warranties of merchantability survive the transaction. In the remaining states, the as-is designation on the buyer's guide you signed is legally operative and extinguishes implied warranty claims. Some dealer groups voluntarily offer 30-day powertrain guarantees as a competitive marketing choice. This is a business decision, not a legal mandate, and the dealerships that offer it do so to differentiate themselves, not because any regulation requires it. Certified pre-owned vehicles carry manufacturer-backed warranties with specific written coverage terms. The consumer protection tool for buyers who want post-sale mechanical coverage is to purchase a CPO vehicle or negotiate a written warranty into the deal before signing, not to assume one exists after the fact. The used vehicle buyer's guide has two checkboxes, as is with no dealer warranty and limited warranty. A signed ASIS buyer's guide in a state where that designation is enforceable is a clear documented waiver. Demanding free repairs on an ASIS car 3 weeks after purchase is like demanding a return on clothes from a final sale rack because you changed your mind. The sign said, final sale. The form said, as is. You signed the form. The deal was always what the form said it was. 31. The dealer told you the car was inspected, you found a problem with the brakes within a few months, and you're treating the inspection claim as a deliberate lie told specifically to conceal a known safety defect that the dealer identified, documented, and then decided to hide from you anyway. A multi-point inspection is a point-in-time assessment that documents component condition at the moment of evaluation. It records current brake pad thickness in millimeters, current tire tread depth, current fluid levels, and it is not a warranty of future performance, a prediction of remaining service life, or a guarantee that components won't reach replacement threshold before your next scheduled service. Brake pad wear rates vary dramatically with driving behavior. A driver who brakes aggressively in stop-and-go commuting can wear pads from acceptable to replacement threshold in 8,000 to 12,000 miles, while a highway driver on the same pads might travel 50,000 miles before reaching that point. A brake pad measuring 4 millimeters at time of inspection, documented as acceptable because it is above the minimum threshold, can reach 2 millimeters within 2,000 to 3,000 miles of assertive urban driving, and that progression reflects physics, not fraud. The MPI record documents what was measured on the day it was performed, and you can request that document post-sale to verify what was recorded. If the dealer documented a measurement that was already at or below the replacement threshold and didn't disclose it, that is a genuine concealment issue worth pursuing. An independent pre-purchase inspection by a mechanic you select provides an unbiased second opinion that the dealer's in-house assessment cannot replicate, and its $100 to $150 cost is the appropriate consumer tool for verifying what the dealer's inspection found. Blaming a dealer for brake wear that occurred while you were driving the car is like blaming a doctor for your knees after you ran a marathon the week after your physical. 32. Your interest rate is 18.9%. You've decided this constitutes usury, and you intend to contact your state attorney general about what you're characterizing as criminal predatory lending, targeting a consumer whose credit score of 580 shouldn't, in your assessment, prevent them from accessing the same financing terms as buyers with decades of clean payment history and zero derogatory marks. Usury laws are state-specific, highly variable, and most states exempt auto loans from consumer usury ceilings entirely. The Depository Institutions, Deregulation and Monetary Control Act of 1980 preempted state usury limits for federally insured lending institutions across most loan categories, which is why lenders chartered in states with minimal rate restrictions can offer financing in states that historically had caps. Subprime auto loan interest rates for borrowers with scores below 620 average 15 to 22% APR as of 2023, according to Experian's State of the Auto Finance Market Report. Your rate sits within that documented range for your credit tier, and it reflects the statistically higher default probability associated with your credit profile, not discriminatory intent. A credit score of 580 predicts a materially higher default rate than a score of 720. Lenders price this risk differential into their offered rates, which is the actuarially justified basis of risk-based pricing and the same principle that determines your car insurance premium. The CFPB monitors auto lending for discriminatory rate markup above what credit risk justifies, and those enforcement actions address systemic disparities backed by statistical analysis. A high rate driven by your documented credit tier is risk-based pricing, not discrimination. The consumer solutions to a high rate are consistent and documented. Improve your credit score before purchasing. Apply through a credit union, which typically offers lower rates for the same credit tier, or make a larger down payment to reduce lender exposure. The rate reflects your file. You built that file, it has your name on it. 33, the salesperson told you there would be complimentary oil changes included with your purchase. You have no documentation of this commitment, and you're now at the service counter demanding the dealer honor a verbal promise that exists exclusively in your recollection of a conversation that occurred during the most financially pressured interaction of your recent memory. The parole evidence rule is a foundational principle of contract law. When parties execute a written contract, prior or contemporaneous oral statements cannot contradict or supplement the written terms, and the signed document is treated as the complete and entire agreement between the parties. Vehicle purchase contracts typically include an integration clause that explicitly states the written agreement constitutes the complete contract between the parties, superseding all prior representations made verbally or otherwise. This clause exists precisely because verbal promises made during negotiations have historically been a significant source of post-sale disputes. Dealership service promotions that are legitimately offered, lifetime oil changes, complimentary maintenance packages, free first service, are documented in writing as addenda to the purchase contract or issued as separate written vouchers with defined terms and conditions because they create ongoing service department obligations that require documentation to be honored consistently. A salesperson who makes a verbal promise that doesn't appear in writing either made a commitment outside their authority or made a statement that was never intended as a binding offer. In either case, it carries no contractual force. The consumer protection here is entirely behavioral. If any promise is made during negotiations, free oil changes, price protection, accessory installation, anything, stop the process immediately and request that it be added to the written contract before signing. 4 seconds and 1 sentence prevent the entire dispute. Demanding a dealer honor a verbal promise that didn't make it into the contract is like demanding a contractor build a second bathroom because you remember discussing it on a phone call. The blueprint is what was signed. The phone call was a conversation. 34, you drove to the dealership to buy a specific advertised vehicle, were told it sold that morning, and immediately concluded that the vehicle never existed. That it was invented specifically to bring you through the door so a coordinated team of salespeople could redirect you to something more expensive in a scheme that has apparently been operating successfully enough to remain undetected by every regulatory agency in the state. True bait and switch advertising requires advertising a product with no genuine intention of selling it at the advertised price, and it requires deceptive intent as a core legal element, not unfortunate timing, not an inventory system that didn't update before your arrival, not a vehicle that a different buyer purchased at 9:45 this morning while you were still on the highway. Vehicles sell in real time at successful dealerships, and the timing of your arrival relative to another buyer's completed purchase is coincidence that requires no explanation beyond the fact that someone else wanted the same car and got there first. FTC guidelines on bait and switch advertising direct enforcement agencies to look for documented patterns of conduct. A dealership that consistently advertises vehicles at prices not supported by their actual inventory, or that consistently steers arriving customers away from available advertised vehicles. A single advertised vehicle selling before your arrival is not actionable under any reading of those guidelines. The consumer protection tool is preventative. Call the dealership before leaving your house, request the specific VIN, confirm it is physically present on the lot, and ask for an email confirmation. That call takes 3 minutes and eliminates the possibility of driving 45 minutes to discover the car you wanted is gone. Calling it bait and switch because a popular car sold before you arrived is like calling a restaurant bait and switch because the daily special ran out at 7:30. Inventory moves. The solution is arriving earlier or calling ahead. It is not filing as federal complaint. 35. There was no loaner car available when you dropped your vehicle for service, your rights were violated, and you intend to pursue this through whatever channel is appropriate for a business that has failed to provide a courtesy vehicle you consider a constitutional guarantee rather than an optional service benefit that varies by dealership, brand, warranty coverage, and the simple logistics of a fleet that has a finite number of vehicles in it. No federal law requires dealers to provide loaner vehicles during routine service or even during warranty repairs. The obligation, where it genuinely exists, is contained in specific warranty program terms or franchise agreement standards. And neither of those is a consumer legal right. They are contractual commitments operating in a different layer of the business entirely. Manufacturer warranty programs sometimes include loaner provisions for specific repair types or when a vehicle will be out of service beyond a defined duration. These commitments are made by the manufacturer, disclosed in the warranty documentation, and reimbursed to the dealer. They are not invented on demand because a customer requests one. Some states' lemon law statutes include substitute transportation provisions when a vehicle is out of service for an extended period during the warranty repair process. This is the narrow, specific, legally supported circumstance where the right actually exists and it requires documented qualifying conditions. Luxury brand franchise agreements frequently require dealers to maintain loaner fleets as a brand standard, which explains why your BMW dealer has loaners and why that is a franchise obligation rather than a universal consumer entitlement that transfers to every other dealership you visit. A shortage of loaner vehicles reflects the arithmetic of fleet size against service volume on a given day. It is a customer experience shortcoming addressable through a conversation, not a rights violation addressable through litigation. Demanding a loaner as a legal right is like demanding a courtesy umbrella at a dry cleaner. Some offer it. It is generous when they do. It was always a courtesy. You are currently confusing courtesy with entitlement, and those two things have never been the same. 36. You want a written price quote before you'll discuss anything further. You've informed the salesperson this is your legal right, and you've implied consequences for the dealership's failure to produce a formal document on demand during an active negotiation in a showroom that operates on its own timeline and processes, regardless of your procedural preferences. No federal law and no state consumer protection statute requires a dealer to produce a written price quote during the negotiation phase of a vehicle sale. The mandatory written disclosures in automotive retail are the Monroney sticker, the buyer's guide on used vehicles, and the final purchase contract, none of which are a negotiation phase price quote issued on customer demand. Written quotes are a customer service tool and competitive practice that dealers use voluntarily because they build trust and advance sales. Dealers who provide them do so because it works commercially, not because any regulator requires it. Some states' consumer protection statutes require that any price communicated in writing be honored if the customer accepts within a reasonable time, which is exactly why some dealers prefer verbal negotiation before committing anything to paper. The legal consequence of written commitments creates a rational preference for verbal discussion at the front end. The consumer strategy that actually works and has been documented to work consistently by Edmunds, Consumer Reports, and every automotive consumer advocate, Arbitern, is to request an out-the-door price quote via email before visiting the dealership. Email accomplishes everything a written showroom quote accomplishes. It creates a documented record. Most dealers comply because it advances the sale, and it requires none of the confrontation you're currently generating by demanding formal documentation mid-negotiation in a showroom. Demanding a written quote as a legal right and threatening consequences when declined is like demanding a chef hand you a written recipe before you'll consider ordering. You can ask for it politely and most will accommodate you. The law was never the reason they would comply. 37. The dealer told you a specific paint color has limited availability. You suspect this is an invented scarcity designed to justify a higher price, and you've demanded production data before you'll accept that the color you want isn't sitting in a warehouse somewhere waiting to be allocated to buyers who don't ask inconvenient questions. Automotive production allocation by color is a documented operational reality. Manufacturers produce specific color variants in quantities calibrated to projected regional demand, and what is common in one market can be genuinely scarce in another based on historical sales patterns that the manufacturer's production planning team uses to set build ratios. Black, white, gray, and silver consistently account for more than 75% of global automotive production, according to PPG Industries' annual color popularity report, which means every color outside that range is produced in meaningfully smaller quantities as a mathematical consequence of how production is divided. Low volume colors are sometimes discontinued after a single model year, and certain manufacturer special order colors have documented limited production runs that enthusiast databases track precisely because availability is genuinely constrained by the build schedule. Dealers receive allocation from their zone office based on their sales volume, meaning a lower volume franchise may receive 1 or 2 units of a specific color per model year, regardless of how many customers request it. The consumer verification tool is straightforward. The vehicle's window sticker lists the paint code, and manufacturer production data for most mainstream brands is available through enthusiast registries and forums that document build quantities by color and model year. Factory ordering the vehicle directly resolves the availability question entirely. The 8 to 12 week wait for a factory ordered vehicle reflects actual production scheduling, not dealer theater. Assuming scarcity is always a sales tactic is like assuming the last seat on a flight is a lie to make you pay more. Sometimes inventory is actually limited. Supply chains are real. Paint booths run on schedules that predate your complaint. 38, you walked into the finance office, a product called Gap Insurance was presented. You signed the line, authorizing it, and you're now describing the transaction as coercion. Financial pressure so overwhelming that your signature was rendered involuntary despite being physically produced by your hand on a document that listed the product, the price, and the coverage terms in language you could have read before signing. Gap Insurance covers the difference between a vehicle's actual cash value at the time of a total loss and the remaining loan balance. It is a genuinely useful product for buyers who finance with minimal down payments or extended loan terms, because depreciation in the first year of ownership can create a gap between what the vehicle is worth and what you still owe that your primary insurance policy will not cover. No federal law and no state law mandates gap insurance as a condition of vehicle financing. Lenders may recommend it, dealers may present it persistently, but the purchase requires your signed authorization and nothing else moves forward without it. Dealers earn a commission on Gap products sold through the FI office, which explains the enthusiasm of the presentation. A financial incentive and a legal obligation are different things, and the presence of one does not create the other. Gap insurance purchased through a dealership is frequently priced between $600 and $900. The same coverage added to your existing auto insurance policy typically costs $20 to $40 per year, a difference that was available to you before you sat down in that office. Most Gap products can be canceled within 30 to 60 days of purchase for a full refund, or prorated after that window, and this cancellation right is disclosed in the contract you received at signing. Claiming GAP was mandatory is like claiming the appetizer was mandatory because the server described it confidently. Confidence in a sales pitch and legal compulsion are not the same thing. 39. You bought a new car 6 months ago, you've brought it back to trade-in, and you're looking at an offer that is several $1,000s below what you paid. An offer you've characterized as deliberate manipulation by a dealer trying to steal equity you built through 6 months of ownership of a depreciating asset in a market that has never once promised to maintain your purchase price. New vehicles depreciate 15 to 25% in the first year of ownership. This is not a dealership policy, not a negotiating tactic, and not a regional phenomenon. It is a fundamental economic characteristic of the new vehicle market that has been documented, published, and discussed in personal finance education for decades. Vehicles lose approximately 10% of value the moment they are driven off the lot, transitioning from new to used pricing, and an additional 10 to 15% within the first 12 months, according to Carfax depreciation data. The front-loaded nature of this curve means the first year represents the steepest loss in the vehicle's entire ownership life cycle. The dealer's trade-in offer reflects what they can realistically resell your vehicle for in the used market, where it competes with other pre-owned inventory and the manufacturer's own certified pre-owned program, all of which are priced below new. A small category of vehicles, certain trucks, specific SUVs, limited production sports cars, hold value unusually well and sometimes appreciate in constrained markets, but these are exceptions documented in Black Book and NADA data, not the rule that applies to the vehicle you're currently trading in. The depreciation dynamic is covered in virtually every personal finance resource that addresses vehicle ownership costs. Consumer Reports, Edmunds, and every automotive financial guide treat it as a primary cost of ownership factor. Being outraged that your 6-month-old car is worth less than you paid is like being outraged that your 6-month-old smartphone lost value. Depreciation is not a conspiracy, it is a calendar with math attached to it. 40. You wanted to bring your own mechanic to inspect a used vehicle before purchasing it. The dealer created friction around scheduling, and you've interpreted any resistance as confirmation of mechanical catastrophe lurking beneath the surface. Because a dealer with nothing to hide would obviously hand over the keys instantly and wait patiently while a stranger conducts an unsupervised inspection of their inventory. No federal law explicitly grants a buyer the right to bring a mechanic to a dealership, but no law prohibits it either, and reputable dealers accommodate pre-purchase inspections because facilitating them closes sales and builds the kind of trust that generates referrals. The standard industry process for a pre-purchase inspection involves scheduling coordination. The buyer arranges an appointment at an independent shop, the dealer consents to the vehicle leaving the lot temporarily or to an inspector arriving during business hours, and the inspection proceeds at a mutually workable time. Friction around scheduling is a customer service failure worth noting. An outright refusal to allow any independent inspection is a documented red flag cited by State Attorney General Consumer Protection Divisions as a warning sign of potential concealment. Consumer advocates at Consumer Reports, Edmunds, and the Car Buying Academy uniformly recommend independent pre-purchase inspections and document that most reputable dealers facilitate them as standard practice. The ones who don't are not the ones you want to buy from anyway. The inspection takes 60 to 90 minutes at an independent shop and costs $100 to $150. It produces a detailed mechanical assessment of current component condition that no marketing claim, no dealer inspection report, and no Carfax entry can replicate. A dealer who delays a pre-purchase inspection deserves scrutiny. A dealer who schedules it for tomorrow afternoon deserves the sale. The difference between those two dealers was the information you were actually looking for the entire time. 41. The price on the dealer's website was one number on Monday and a different number when you arrived on Saturday, and you've brought a screenshot as evidence of the bait and switch you intend to report, printed on paper, presented with the confidence of someone who believes a screenshot of a dynamic pricing display constitutes a binding commercial instrument. Online vehicle prices are updated in real time through inventory management systems that most dealers use, CDK, Reynolds & Reynolds, DealerSocket, and pricing adjustments happen based on market data feeds, competitive positioning analysis, aging inventory algorithms, and demand signals that the system processes continuously without human intervention for each individual change. A screenshot is not a contract. It is a record of what a website displayed at a specific moment, and it carries no binding force under contract law because it lacks the elements of a valid offer. It was not communicated to you as a specific proposal, you did not accept it, and no consideration changed hands. FTC advertising guidelines require that advertised prices be available for a reasonable time, and the agency has not defined a specific duration. Daily price changes are not inherently a regulatory violation, and the website disclaimers that virtually all dealer sites carry, stating that prices are subject to change without notice, are legally sufficient disclosure of exactly this dynamic. Prices that increase between your first look and your visit are a legitimate customer service complaint worth raising. Prices that decrease during the same window are not something consumers call to report, which tells you something about the selective nature of screenshot outrage. The consumer protection against this scenario has always been the same 3-minute process. Call the dealer, confirm the VIN-specific price, request email confirmation of that price before leaving your house. Demanding a dealer honor a screenshot price from 5 days ago is like demanding an airline honor a fare you saw but didn't book. Looking at a price has never been buying it. 42. You discovered a line item on your contract for nitrogen-filled tires. You've declared the entire thing a profit-padding scam with no legitimate basis in science or commerce, and you want it removed and replaced with regular air at no charge. Overlooking the fact that nitrogen and your objection to it are actually two separate complaints that deserve to be separated before either one is addressed. Nitrogen molecules are larger than oxygen molecules, which causes them to migrate through tire rubber more slowly than air. This produces more stable tire pressure over time, particularly across temperature swings, and it is the reason racing teams, commercial aircraft, and large commercial trucking operations use nitrogen as standard practice. Consumer reports testing found that nitrogen-filled tires lost pressure at a slower rate than air-filled tires over extended measurement periods. And while the practical benefit for typical passenger vehicle drivers was modest enough that regular pressure checks largely eliminated the real-world advantage, the benefit is documentable and the product is not fraudulent. The legitimate complaint is not that nitrogen is a scam, it is that it was installed on your vehicle and added to your contract without anyone asking whether you wanted it, which is an add-on consent problem that is worth addressing directly with the dealer. Once nitrogen is in the tires, adding regular air does not cause harm. Contrary to some dealer presentations, mixing nitrogen and air simply dilutes the nitrogen percentage and restores most of the characteristics of a conventionally inflated tire, without damage to the tire or the vehicle. The price charged for nitrogen as a pre-installed dealer add-on, typically $150 to $300, is frequently disproportionate to its benefit relative to the cost of checking your own tire pressure monthly. Calling nitrogen tires a scam because you don't understand the product is wrong. Calling them a problem because nobody asked before charging you is right. Make the correct complaint. 43. Your new vehicle has a warranty claim that was denied or delayed, and you've directed the full force of your frustration at the dealership, at the salesperson who sold you the car, at the service advisor who delivered the denial, at the building itself. Because the manufacturer's warranty administration team made a decision and the dealer is the most physically accessible target for your response to it. New vehicle limited warranties are contracts between the manufacturer, Ford Motor Company, Toyota Motor Corporation, General Motors, Stellantis, and the buyer. The dealer is an authorized repair facility operating within the manufacturer's service network, not a party to the warranty contract, and the service advisor who told you the claim was denied was communicating a decision made by the manufacturer's warranty administration system, not issuing a personal ruling from behind the service counter. Warranty repair reimbursement flows from manufacturer to dealer. Dealers submit claims to the manufacturer's warranty administration system and are reimbursed at a rate the manufacturer sets, which means dealers have no financial incentive to deny legitimate claims and no authority to overturn denied ones unilaterally. The correct escalation path for a warranty dispute is sequential and documented. Service manager first, then the manufacturer's regional customer service representative, then the manufacturer's customer relations hotline, then the state Lehman Law process if the defect meets the statutory criteria for that jurisdiction. Many states require manufacturers to participate in dispute resolution or arbitration programs before a warranty dispute reaches the court system, and dealers are not parties to that process. The dispute is between you and the entity that issued the warranty, which is the manufacturer. Yelling at a dealership service advisor about a manufacturer warranty decision is like yelling at the flight attendant about the airline's refund policy. They work for the brand. They did not write the contract, and they cannot override the decision that the people who wrote the contract just made. 44. You've concluded that all dealers are the same. Identical pricing, identical service quality, identical financing options, identical customer experience. And you're using this conclusion either to justify not shopping around or to explain why the bad experience you had at one dealership indicts the entire brand's retail network simultaneously. Franchise dealerships are independently owned and operated businesses, which means the Toyota store near your office and the Toyota store 30 miles away share a brand identity, a product line, a franchise agreement, and not much else. Staffing, culture, pricing philosophy, financing relationships, and service department quality are determined by the owner and management of each specific location. The largest dealer groups in the country, AutoNation, Penske Automotive, Lithia Motors, operate hundreds of franchises with standardized processes that differ from family-owned single-point operations in ways that are material to the customer experience, and both models exist within the same brand network simultaneously. Transaction price variation between dealers selling the identical vehicle in the same market can exceed $3,000 to $5,000 according to Edmunds transaction data, reflecting the pricing discretion each dealer exercises independently within the brand framework. J.D. Power's Customer Service Index scores individual dealerships, and the spread between the highest performing and lowest performing franchisees within a single brand is wide enough to represent genuinely different service experiences, not minor variations. Shopping multiple dealers of the same brand, which takes approximately 45 minutes of email correspondence, is universally recommended by consumer advocates and routinely surfaces price differences that more than justify the time investment. Financing relationships differ by dealer volume and lender agreements, meaning at the high-volume store may access rate tiers unavailable at a smaller franchise on the same block. Assuming all dealers are identical is like assuming all franchise restaurant locations execute identically. The manual is the same, the people are different, and the people are the part that determines your experience. 45, you got a good deal, a genuinely good deal, and now you've convinced yourself that the gap between what you paid and what the dealer would have accepted is evidence of hidden charges yet to come. A financial reckoning being prepared in a back office while you drive home feeling pleased with yourself. Dealers have multiple legitimate revenue streams that exist independently of front-end vehicle margin, and selling a vehicle at or near invoice is a rational business decision when those streams are accounted for. Manufacturer to dealer incentives, factory cash, conquest cash, loyalty cash, are paid after the sale and can range from $500 to $5,000 per vehicle depending on model and program, allowing dealers to sell below invoice and still generate net profit on the transaction. Holdback payments of roughly 2 to 3% of MSRP are paid quarterly to dealers based on units sold. A vehicle sold at invoice may still produce $400 to $900 in holdback income that the customer's negotiation never touched. Volume bonus programs, sometimes called stair-step incentives, pay dealers additional per-unit bonuses when monthly or quarterly sales targets are hit, meaning a dealer near their bonus threshold may sell a vehicle at a loss on the unit to unlock a larger bonus payment that makes the portfolio profitable. The FI opportunity exists on every vehicle regardless of front-end margin. Extended warranties, gap, paint protection, and financing reserve are available whether the vehicle sold at sticker or below invoice. Post-sale hidden charges, dealers adding unauthorized line items or calling customers to claim additional money is owed, are documented predatory practices and genuine fraud, and the protection against them is reading the final contract completely before signing and confirming the out-the-door total matches the agreed number. A good deal is not a conspiracy. Dealers have other ways to make money. Paranoia is not a financial strategy. 46. You discovered that your vehicle has undisclosed accident history or a title issue that didn't surface on the Carfax report, and you're distributing blame equally between the dealer for selling it and Carfax for failing to catch it, treating a private third-party data aggregator as an infallible government registry with comprehensive knowledge of every event in every vehicle's history. Carfax aggregates data from thousands of sources, including state DMVs, insurance companies, auto auctions, and repair shops, and it is only as complete as the reporting those sources voluntarily provide. Significant gaps are documented, expected, and explicitly disclosed by Carfax in its own terms of service, which states clearly that Carfax does not have the complete history of every vehicle. Cash insurance settlements, where an owner accepts payment without filing an official insurance claim, generate no Carfax record regardless of the damage involved because the event never entered any reporting system. Repairs performed at independent shops that don't participate in Carfax's data network leave no record in the report. Only contributing data partners appear in the history. The NMVTIS, the National Motor Vehicle Title Information System, is the government-backed title database whose data Carfax incorporates, and it is independently accessible for free at vehiclehistory.gov. A buyer who checks both sources before purchasing has done more due diligence than one who relies on a single private report. A pre-purchase inspection by an independent mechanic assessing physical evidence of prior repairs, paint thickness variations across body panels, misaligned gaps, overspray on trim, replaced fasteners, catches undisclosed accident history that no database can identify because it examines the vehicle rather than the reporting system. Trusting Carfax to catch everything and then blaming the dealer when it doesn't is like trusting one reference and being surprised when the hire didn't work out. References tell you what was reported. The inspection tells you what is actually there. You needed both and used one. 47. The vehicle has been on the lot for 90 plus days. You've established that the dealer is desperate and you've arrived with a demand for a specific discount that you consider mandatory based on the vehicle's age. As though the passage of time converts a pricing preference into a legal entitlement. Dealers finance inventory through floor plan credit lines that charge daily interest, typically at rates near prime plus 1 to 2%, meaning a $40,000 vehicle costs the dealer roughly $15 to $25 per day in carrying cost. The economic incentive to move aged inventory is real, and it operates in your favor during negotiation without requiring any legal mandate to activate it. After approximately 60 to 90 days, most dealer inventory management systems flag a vehicle for pricing review, and many automatically trigger price reductions. The dealer's own economics drive discounting on aging stock, which means your leverage in this negotiation is genuine and market-driven. Inventory age data is publicly available. Vehicle listing dates appear on dealer websites. CarGurus displays days on market directly on individual listings, and vehicles with extended tenure receive deal rating indicators that tell you before you arrive how the current price compares to market. Manufacturer incentive programs often include dealer cash specifically targeting slow-moving inventory, time-limited programs that align with vehicle aging and provide additional flexibility that the dealer can pass to a motivated buyer. A customer who identifies a slow-moving color, an awkward option package, or a high-mileage demo is in a genuinely stronger negotiating position than someone walking in on a hot new arrival. The leverage is real, market-driven, and entirely available to you. Dealers sometimes choose auction over deep discounting when a buyer's price falls below what the market will support, meaning the leverage has limits even when the vehicle is old. Knowing that aging inventory gives you leverage is smart. Believing the dealer is legally required to capitulate to your specific number is fiction. Know which tool you are holding. 48. You negotiated a monthly payment at the salesperson's desk, arrived in the finance office, and discovered the number is different. And you've declared the discrepancy deceptive. Evidence of a payment manipulation scheme specifically designed to extract money from buyers who paid attention during the sales process but apparently not during the finance process. A monthly payment quoted at the sales desk before entering the finance office is a preliminary estimate based on a negotiated vehicle price, an assumed credit tier, an assumed loan term, and an assumed down payment. It is explicitly not the final payment until the finance office calculates all variables with actual lender approval, actual tax figures for your specific jurisdiction, and actual fees that weren't yet known when the desk estimate was produced. Preliminary payment quotes cannot include taxes, which vary by state, county, and municipality, registration fees, which vary by vehicle weight and declared value, or FI products that haven't yet been presented. These are genuinely unknown until the deal is fully structured with a specific lender on a specific term. The final payment disclosed in the finance office on the formal credit application is governed by the Truth in Lending Act, which requires written disclosure of the APR, loan term, total amount financed, and total cost of credit. This is the legally binding document, not the number on the notepad from the sales floor. Payment packing, where a dealer artificially inflates a monthly payment to create room to layer in add-ons without appearing to increase the payment, is a documented predatory practice regulated by the FTC, and it is distinct from a desk estimate differing from a finance office calculation. The consumer protection is structural. Negotiate the out-the-door price first as a complete number, then finance that fixed amount. Monthly payment negotiation without knowing the total price is the single most documented mistake car buyers make, and it produces exactly the confusion you're now describing. 49. You found a lower price on the same vehicle at a dealership 800 miles away. You've demanded the local dealer match it exactly, and when declined, you've concluded that regional pricing differences must be the product of an illegal agreement between competitors to maintain artificially elevated prices in your market. Sherman Antitrust Act violations require proof of an agreement between competitors to set prices at an artificial level. Dealers in different markets competing independently and arriving at different prices as a result of different demand levels, different inventory positions, and different competitive environments is the operational definition of a functioning market, which is the opposite of price fixing. Regional price variation in automotive retail is documented and expected. Vehicles in high-demand urban markets transact above national averages consistently, while lower competition markets see prices that reflect fewer competing dealerships and different buyer demographics. These differences emerge from independent decision-making, not coordination. A dealer in one market has no obligation to match prices offered by a competitor in a different market, and this is true in every retail category that exists, not uniquely in automotive. The hardware store in one city does not match prices from a store in another state, and no antitrust theory requires it to. Manufacturer franchise agreements often restrict dealers from selling new vehicles to buyers in other dealers' primary market areas, meaning the out-of-market price you found may be contractually unavailable to you as a buyer from outside that dealer's territory, regardless of the number. Practical consumer options include purchasing from the out-of-market dealer with associated shipping or travel costs, factory ordering from a local dealer which may produce competitive pricing, or presenting the competing price as negotiating leverage, which local dealers often respond to. Calling regional price differences price fixing reveals a misunderstanding of what price fixing means thorough enough to accidentally argue for the opposite conclusion. Different prices from different competitors in different markets is exactly what a non-price fixed market looks like. 50. Your factory ordered vehicle is late. The delivery window the dealer originally quoted has passed, and you've concluded the dealer is either deliberately withholding your unit or has sold it to a higher bidding buyer while you waited patiently for months. Factory ordered vehicle production and delivery timelines are controlled by the manufacturer's production planning team, not by the dealer. Dealers receive a production date notification when an order is scheduled into the build sequence and have essentially no ability to intervene in when that scheduling occurs or how quickly the vehicle moves through production. The semiconductor shortage of 2021 through 2023 caused documented production delays averaging 2 to 4 months beyond initial estimates across most brands. A disruption caused by global supply chain failures involving chip manufacturers in Asia, not by anything any individual dealer controlled or could have anticipated when your order was placed. Hot swap allocation abuse, where a dealer diverts a factory-ordered vehicle to a higher bidding customer, does occur and violates most manufacturer franchise agreements when documented, making it both a real concern and a franchise-level violation worth escalating to the manufacturer if you have evidence. Manufacturer production tracking portals provide real-time order status updates accessible to dealers and sometimes to customers directly via order number. A dealer who cannot or will not provide regular status updates is failing a basic service obligation that you are entitled to escalate to the service manager or manufacturer representative. Shipping transit time from factory to port to rail to dealership adds 2 to 6 weeks after production completion, and this downstream logistics time is outside the dealer's control in the same way the production schedule is. Blaming the dealer for a production delay is like blaming the travel agent for a flight delay. They book the reservation. They don't operate the factory. The manufacturer runs on its own schedule. The dealer's job is to report it honestly, not to control it. 51. You drove to a dealership based on an online listing, discovered a minor discrepancy between the description and the physical vehicle. A missing accessory, a slightly different trim notation, and you're now demanding either a full price reduction or the right to exit a signed contract because the listing's marketing copy didn't match the physical vehicle in a detail you consider material and that contract law may consider otherwise. Legal misrepresentation requires a false statement of material fact, knowledge of its falsity or reckless disregard for the truth, intent to induce reliance, and actual damages flowing from that reliance, a missing floor mat, or an incorrect wheel description in a listing generated from VIN-decoded data that didn't account for a late-stage factory substitution, fails this standard on multiple elements simultaneously. Automotive listing errors are common and frequently unintentional. VIN decoding tools pull option data from manufacturer databases that sometimes lag behind actual factory configurations, creating discrepancies between what the listing says and what the vehicle actually has that reflect data latency, not deliberate misrepresentation. The FTC's used car rule and state consumer protection statutes address material misrepresentation in vehicle condition and history. They are not designed to adjudicate accessory-level listing discrepancies that could have been identified by looking at the vehicle before signing anything. The correct response to a listing discrepancy discovered before signing is to point it out, request the missing item or a corresponding price adjustment, and negotiate. If the dealer declines and the item matters enough, walk away before your signature appears on anything. A vehicle delivered as a different trim level than specifically represented in writing is a genuine fraud claim worth pursuing. A vehicle delivered without the cargo mat shown in a stock photo is a minor discrepancy worth a polite conversation. Knowing where your situation falls on that spectrum determines what your next move should be and how seriously anyone with actual authority will take it. 52. The dealer is obligated to accept your trade-in as part of the purchase. It is, in your understanding, a standard component of a vehicle transaction that the dealer cannot simply decline without triggering whatever consumer protection mechanism prevents businesses from being inconvenient. A vehicle purchase and a trade-in appraisal are two legally distinct transactions, and the dealer is making an independent buying decision on the trade-in that they can decline for any legitimate business reason, including the vehicle's title status, mechanical condition, negative equity position, or the dealer's current inventory mix for that vehicle category. Dealers decline trade-ins for documented legitimate reasons: salvage titles that restrict retail resale options, vehicles with mechanical issues that exceed the dealer's reconditioning budget at any viable price, extreme mileage that limits auction value, or negative equity so significant it cannot be absorbed into the new deal structure without creating a loan-to-value ratio no lender will approve. Vehicles with rollover accident history, flood damage, or frame damage often cannot be sold retail and are difficult to move even at auction. Declining to accept one as a trade is sound business judgment applied to a specific vehicle's characteristics, not an illegal refusal applied to a specific customer. Consumer alternatives to dealer trade-in include CarMax, Carvana, and Vroom, which provide instant offers independent of any new purchase and frequently produce more competitive values than dealer trade appraisals. The FTC explicitly notes that selling a vehicle separately before purchasing a new one is often the financially superior approach. The FTC does not require dealers to accept trade-ins and has never characterized a trade-in refusal as an unfair or deceptive practice when applied to a vehicle the dealer has legitimate grounds to decline. Demanding a dealer accept your trade-in is like demanding a clothing store accept your old clothes as partial payment. It is their store. They can say no. There are other buyers for what you're selling. 53, you felt rushed during signing, decisions were made faster than you were comfortable with, and you've now determined that the time pressure created during the finance office process constitutes legal duress sufficient to void the entire purchase contract. Duress, specifically, the kind that courts recognize as overcoming free will and leaving a party with no reasonable alternative. Legal duress requires a wrongful act or unlawful threat that overcomes the free will of a reasonable person and leaves no reasonable alternative but compliance. Courts in every jurisdiction set a high bar for this standard, and a salesperson saying this offer is only good today, or a finance office moving through documents at the pace of a busy weekday, does not satisfy it under any reading of applicable contract law. Artificial urgency is a manipulative sales tactic. It is widely used, it is uncomfortable, and it is legal, which means it occupies the category of things you can object to morally while being unable to challenge legally without something more than discomfort to point to. The reasonable alternative that contract law requires to be absent for a duress claim is this: leaving. A customer can always stand up, explain they need more time to review the documents, and walk out of the finance office. If they choose not to exercise that option, courts treat that choice as voluntary, regardless of the social pressure involved. Psychological sales pressure tactics in automotive retail are regulated by the FTC under unfair or deceptive acts or practices standards, but proven deception is required. Documented misrepresentation, not the feeling of being rushed through a process you could have slowed yourself. The behavioral solution is available and effective. Request the contract to review before signing, bring a second person to the finance office, or simply slow down regardless of the implied timeline. Claiming a contract is void because you felt hurried is like claiming you don't owe for dinner because the server seemed impatient. The door was open the entire time. It still is. 54. Your production delayed vehicle finally arrived. The delivery window the dealer quoted at ordering was different from the actual delivery date by several weeks, and you want to know which specific misrepresentation law the dealer violated when they gave you a timeline that turned out to be optimistic in a supply chain environment that no one in the industry was accurately predicting in real time. Delivery window estimates for factory-ordered vehicles are provided by dealers based on information from the manufacturer's production scheduling system at the time the order is placed. They reflect the manufacturer's current build cadence, parts availability projections, and logistics timelines, all of which can and do change after the order is submitted without any action or inaction by the dealer. The manufacturer's production planning team adjusts build schedules based on parts supply, plant capacity, model mix targets, and logistics constraints that operate continuously and independently of any individual dealer's commitments to individual customers. A dealer who quoted 8 weeks based on information from the manufacturer's system at order entry is not misrepresenting when the system subsequently pushes the build date. Semiconductor shortages, shipping delays, and rail network disruptions caused widespread delivery estimate failures across virtually every manufacturer simultaneously during 2021 through 2023, producing delivery delays that were documented in business press, acknowledged by every automaker, and entirely outside the dealership's operational control. The dealer's obligation in this situation is transparency, providing updated status information as it becomes available from the manufacturer's tracking system, communicating schedule changes promptly, and escalating to the manufacturer's regional representative when a customer's timeline concern requires manufacturer level response. Consumer protection in this scenario comes from documented communication, a delivery estimate in writing, regular status updates in writing, and a clear understanding of what remedies are available if the delay exceeds what either party considers acceptable. Blaming the dealer for an estimate that the manufacturer's own schedule made inaccurate is assigning accountability to the person who transmitted information rather than the source that changed it. 55. The listing described the vehicle in terms you interpreted one way, the physical car presented itself slightly differently, and you want a full refund on a signed contract because marketing language about condition didn't survive contact with the actual vehicle you inspected, test drove, and authorized a purchase agreement on before driving home. The FTC distinguishes between puffery, subjective quality claims that no reasonable consumer is expected to treat as factual warranties, and actionable misrepresentation, which requires a false statement of objective fact that induced your reliance and caused measurable damages. A description that characterized condition optimistically without making specific false claims about trim level, mileage, or mechanical history falls in the first category, and courts have consistently upheld that distinction across decades of consumer protection litigation. The correct time to identify a discrepancy between a listing's description and a vehicle's actual condition is before signing. During the test drive, during the walkthrough, during the window of time when you were physically present with the car and could compare what you were looking at to what you were told. The buyer's guide you signed is the operative disclosure document. It identifies warranty status and as-is condition in language that is both explicit and legally binding, and it supersedes listing copy in the event of any conflict between the two. A vehicle delivered as a materially different trim level than specifically represented in writing is a fraud claim worth pursuing through your state attorney general's Consumer Protection Division. A vehicle delivered without the exact accessories shown in a stock photograph that represented a generic model rather than your specific unit is a discrepancy worth a conversation with the sales manager. Knowing which category your situation falls into determines whether you need a lawyer or a polite phone call. Demanding a full refund on a signed contract because a listing was optimistic is like returning a house because the listing photos used a wide-angle lens. The walkthrough was your opportunity. You had it. 56. The dealer won't accept your trade-in vehicle as a mandatory component of the transaction, and you've characterized this refusal as evidence of bad faith dealing rather than what it actually is, which is a business declining to purchase an asset it has assessed and determined it cannot profitably acquire at any price that makes the overall transaction viable. No federal consumer protection statute and no state motor vehicle dealer regulation requires a dealer to accept any specific vehicle as a trade-in because the trade-in is a separate purchase transaction in which the dealer is the buyer and retains the buyer's right to decline. Dealers decline trades for reasons that are operationally straightforward. A salvage or rebuilt title restricts retail resale and limits auction options. Significant negative equity creates a loan-to-value problem that lenders won't approve. Mechanical condition requiring reconditioning that exceeds the vehicle's wholesale value at any reasonable price, or inventory saturation in that specific segment that gives the dealer no realistic path to reselling what you're offering. The FTC explicitly notes in its consumer automotive guidance that selling your current vehicle separately before purchasing a new one is frequently the financially superior approach. Not because dealers are unreasonable, but because the competitive marketplace for used vehicles includes CarMax, Carvana, Vroom, and private buyers, all of whom may offer more than the dealer's wholesale-anchored appraisal. Negative equity, where your loan balance exceeds the trade-in value, complicates but doesn't prevent trading in. It must be absorbed into the new deal's financing structure, creating a higher loan amount and monthly payment that some customers find objectionable only after the math is explained. Demanding a dealer accept your trade is like demanding any buyer purchase any asset you're selling. The right to say no belongs to every buyer in every transaction. The dealer exercised theirs. The market has other buyers. Find them. 57. You felt time pressure sitting during the signing process. You moved faster than you would have preferred, and you've decided this constitutes grounds to void completed contractual obligations. Specifically, that the urgency created by a busy finance office on a Saturday afternoon legally qualifies as duress, capable of unwinding a signed purchase agreement under contract law. Contract law defines duress as a wrongful act or unlawful threat that eliminates the reasonable alternatives available to a party, leaving them no choice but to comply. And a sales tactic creating urgency, however uncomfortable, is neither wrongful nor unlawful in any jurisdiction that has addressed the question. The reasonable alternative that must be absent for duress to apply was present the entire time you were in that office. You could stand up, explain you needed more time to read the documents, and leave. Courts treat the decision not to exercise that option as a voluntary choice, regardless of social discomfort or implied deadline. FTC regulation of automotive sales practices addresses unfair or deceptive acts, documented misrepresentation, not emotional pressure, applied through implication and urgency language that stops short of a specific false claim. A salesperson saying a deal expires at close of business is operating within legal commercial speech boundaries that consumer protection law has never successfully contracted to exclude urgency as a category. The behavioral tools that actually protect you in a finance office are simple and available. Request time to read each document before signing, bring another person to the appointment, or tell the finance manager directly that you will not be rushed and observe what happens. Most will accommodate the request because the alternative is losing the deal entirely. Claiming a contract is unenforceable because you felt pressure while signing requires the courts to find you had no exit. You had one. It was the door you walked through to get in. It opened from both sides. 58. The previous owner modified the vehicle before you purchased it, and you're demanding the dealer restore it to factory specification at no charge because the dealer sold you the car and therefore bears responsibility for everything every prior owner ever did to it during any previous period of ownership. Dealers acquire used vehicles from trade-ins, auctions, and independent wholesalers, and their disclosure obligation under the FTC used car rule covers known material defects, meaning conditions that impair safety or value that the dealer was aware of at the time of sale. It does not extend to a comprehensive reconstruction of the vehicle's modification history or an obligation to return the vehicle to factory configuration before selling it. Aftermarket modifications that affect safety, suspension components installed without proper alignment, brake system alterations, lighting modifications that don't meet federal safety standards, can constitute material defects when they create documentable safety concerns, and those are legitimate disclosure items worth raising. Cosmetic modifications including aftermarket wheels, window tint, audio system upgrades, and body styling additions are visible during inspection and discoverable before purchase. Their presence or absence affects market value in both directions, and a pre-purchase inspection by an independent mechanic is the appropriate mechanism for evaluating what has been changed and what those changes mean for the vehicle's condition. A dealer who represents a modified vehicle as factory stock in a written document is making a specific false claim that constitutes fraud. A dealer who simply doesn't narrate every modification made by a previous owner to a vehicle the customer could physically inspect before signing is meeting their legal disclosure standard. Expecting a dealer to undo what a previous owner did is like expecting a used bookstore to erase the margin notes the last reader left. They sold you the book as it existed, you could see the pages. The inspection was your tool for reading them before committing. 59. You've purchased 4 vehicles of this brand over 15 years. You consider yourself a loyal customer whose relationship with the brand should produce preferential pricing as a reward for continued patronage. And the dealer's failure to offer a loyalty discount from their own margin is a personal slight against a consumer who has delivered significant revenue to this franchise over more than a decade. Manufacturer loyalty programs are real and financially documented. Toyota, Honda, Ford, and General Motors regularly offer loyalty cash ranging from $500 to $1,500 to returning brand customers through their captive finance subsidiaries, and these incentives are available to be applied to your transaction right now. The loyalty incentive flows from the manufacturer's marketing budget, not from the dealer's gross profit. The dealer's obligation is to apply available manufacturer incentives to your deal, which they are required to do, not to create additional discounting from their own margin as a personal thank you for your purchasing history. Transaction price is determined by current market conditions for the specific vehicle you want, current inventory levels at that dealer, and the negotiation that happens between you and the sales manager. 15 years of brand loyalty changes none of those variables unless it coincides with a manufacturer loyalty program that does. High-volume dealers track customer purchase history and may proactively offer returning customers preferential treatment as a retention strategy. This is a customer service choice that good dealers make, and it is available to you as a conversation to initiate, not a right to invoke. Your loyalty has commercial value to the manufacturer, which is why they've built a program around it. That program is on the table. Ask for it specifically, apply it to the deal, and negotiate the vehicle price separately on its own merits. Expecting a dealer to discount the car because you've bought the brand before is expecting them to compensate you for a relationship they didn't personally benefit from. 60. You couldn't find the configuration you wanted on the lot, and you've concluded the dealer must be concealing inventory in a secondary location. holding stock back from customers who aren't willing to pay a premium, revealing it selectively based on criteria that the dealership has not disclosed and that you are not able to articulate but are certain must exist. Modern dealer inventory management systems feed directly and in real time to dealer websites, Cars.com, AutoTrader, and manufacturer inventory search tools. Every vehicle in a dealer's saleable inventory is listed because unlisted inventory generates no internet leads, and internet leads are how most vehicle sales begin in the current market. Vehicles physically present on a dealer's property but absent from the inventory system are operationally categorized as manufacturer loaner vehicles not yet available for sale, employee personal vehicles, auction purchases awaiting transport, or trade-ins that have not yet cleared title processing. None of these are saleable inventory being withheld from you. Dealer trades, where a dealer sources a specific configuration from another dealer's inventory, are a standard mechanism for matching a customer to a vehicle that isn't in local stock. A dealer who doesn't proactively offer this option when you describe a configuration they don't carry is providing incomplete service that you are entitled to ask about directly. Factory orders are the definitive solution when no regional dealer stock matches your requirements. The vehicle is built to your specification with a typical delivery window of 8 to 12 weeks, and the order is documented from placement through production and delivery. Consumer verification requires 3 minutes. Search the dealer's website by VIN, cross-reference with the manufacturer's inventory locator, and check third-party aggregators. If the vehicle doesn't appear anywhere in those systems, it isn't there. Dealers hide nothing more operationally interesting than occasionally forgetting to update a listing. The backlot has what the database says it has. 61, you received a price over the phone, you drove to the dealership, the number had changed, and you've arrived with the conviction that the verbal quote constitutes a binding contract enforceable against the dealer for any difference between what you were told on the call and what the finance office is now presenting. The statute of frauds, a foundational contract law principle codified in every state, requires that contracts for the sale of goods above $500 be in writing to be enforceable, and a vehicle purchase exceeds that threshold by a margin that makes the writing requirement unambiguous. A verbal phone quote is an invitation to continue the conversation, not a binding offer. It becomes an enforceable commitment only when reduced to writing and executed by both parties, which is the legal standard regardless of how specifically the number was communicated or how clearly you remember the conversation. Phone price quotes change for reasons that are operationally legitimate. The vehicle may have sold between the call and your arrival, manufacturer incentive programs may have expired or changed, or the salesperson may have quoted a figure that the system doesn't support and that they lack the authority to guarantee. The consumer protection tool is email. Any dealer willing to honor a phone quote will confirm it in writing without hesitation, and an emailed price confirmation on a specific VIN creates a documentable record that carries considerably more commercial weight than a phone conversation, even if it still doesn't meet the statute of frauds standard for enforceability. Some state consumer protection statutes treat documented bait and switch conduct as actionable, but they require a pattern of behavior, not a single price discrepancy between a phone call and an in-person visit. The practical recommendation from every automotive consumer resource is identical and has been for 2 decades. Never drive to a dealership without an emailed written confirmation of the price on the specific VIN you intend to buy. Looking at a phone price is not buying it. 62. You've decided the dealership must be getting rich on every car they sell because the building is large, the lot is full, and the transaction feels expensive. And you've used this assumption to justify the belief that any deal you negotiate still leaves obscene margin in the dealer's pocket that a more aggressive customer would have extracted. New vehicle front-end margins at franchise dealerships are among the thinnest in retail commerce. NADA dealership. Financial profile, data shows new vehicle department gross profit averaging 5.5% to 7% of selling price, which on a $40,000 vehicle produces $2,200 to $2,800 before subtracting sales compensation, advertising spend, floor plan interest, and facility overhead. Net profit per new vehicle sold in normalized market conditions averaged approximately $200 to $450. The 2021 through 2023 shortage period was a documented historical anomaly, not the baseline the industry operates from. The profitable areas of a dealership are the finance office, averaging $1,600 to $2,400 per finance unit, the service department, representing 44% of total dealership gross profit according to NADA data, and the used vehicle operation. The new vehicle sales floor is frequently the least profitable department in the building relative to the revenue it generates. Large dealer groups including AutoNation, Lithia, and Penske report net profit margins of 2 to 4% on total revenue. Significant in absolute dollars because of volume, but comparable to grocery retail rather than the luxury margin consumers assume. A customer who negotiates effectively to invoice on a new vehicle has captured most of the available front-end margin. What remains is holdback and manufacturer incentives that fund the business's operations. The obscene profit on every car narrative is a story consumers tell themselves. The NADA data publication tells a different one. The dealers use the NADA version. 63. You discovered post-purchase that your used vehicle was previously part of a rental fleet. You feel the dealer deliberately concealed this information to avoid the discount that rental history would have required, and you're preparing a complaint based on a disclosure obligation you believe exists, but that federal law does not universally impose on dealers in most states. The FTC used car rule requires disclosure of known material defects. Prior rental use is a vehicle history category, not a defect, and it is not among the items the federal rule specifically mandates for disclosure in most jurisdictions. California has specific disclosure requirements for ex-rental vehicles, and a small number of other states have addressed this category. But these are state-specific exceptions that confirm the federal baseline doesn't require it because you don't pass laws mandating something that's already universally required. Prior rental vehicle history is typically visible in Carfax and AutoCheck reports. The consumer who checks these reports before purchase has access to the information without requiring dealer disclosure, which means the information gap is resolved by the buyer's due diligence tool, not by the dealer's unprompted narration. Rental vehicles are often well maintained relative to consumer assumptions. Major rental companies operate structured maintenance programs and typically sell vehicles at 20,000 to 40,000 miles before significant mechanical wear accumulates on any component. The market discount for ex-rental vehicles reflects perceived higher use intensity rather than documented mechanical inferiority, and buyers who identify rental history before negotiating are in a position to use it as pricing leverage. If you ask the dealer directly whether the vehicle was a rental and were told it was not, that is a specific documentable false statement of fact worth pursuing. If no one asked, no one lied. The question was available to you. The Carfax was available to you. Both were on the table before the contract was signed. 64. The trade-in payoff amount the dealer provided differs from what your lender quoted when you called to verify it, and you've characterized the discrepancy as evidence that the dealer falsified the payoff figure to manipulate the equity calculation in their favor during the trade-in appraisal process. Vehicle loan payoffs accrue daily interest. The per diem charge on a $20,000 balance at 6% APR is approximately $3.29 per day, and a 2-week difference between the date the dealer obtained the payoff quote and the date the loan is actually paid off produces a legitimate variance of roughly $46 that reflects accrued interest, not manipulation. Lenders provide payoff quotes that are valid through a specified date. After that date, per diem charges apply, and the payoff increases by a precisely calculable amount that any party can verify using the balance, rate, and days elapsed. Dealers obtain payoff quotes at the time of trade appraisal, and if closing takes longer than the quote's validity window. Because financing approval required additional documentation, because the customer returned after the initial visit, or because the title needed time to process, the payoff increases legitimately. The dealer's legal obligation is to obtain the payoff quote in good faith from your lender and to submit payment promptly upon deal completion. Delays in submitting payment that cause additional interest accrual beyond what the deal's timeline required can represent a service failure worth questioning. If the dealer deliberately reported a false payoff amount, lower to make equity appear better or higher to absorb more of the purchase price, that is fraud documentable by comparing the dealer's stated figure to the lender's contemporaneous quote from the same date. A $47 discrepancy explained by 18 days of per diem interest is not that documentation. Per diem interest runs in your loan contract. The math was always running. No one at the dealership started that clock. 65, you demanded the entire negotiation be conducted via text message, refused to engage through any other channel, and characterized the dealer's preference for email or phone as a deliberate strategy to get you physically present in the building where manipulation becomes possible, rather than an operational preference for communication channels that support document exchange and create clearer records. Email negotiation is explicitly recommended by Edmunds, Consumer Reports, and every automotive consumer advocacy organization that has published guidance on the subject. Dealers respond to email price requests. They provide out-the-door quotes in writing via email, and consumers who negotiate by email before visiting routinely arrive with price, trade value, and financing pre-agreed in documented form. Text messages lack the functional characteristics that vehicle transactions require. No subject line for organized reference, no document attachment capability, no clear thread structure when multiple topics are being negotiated simultaneously, and no integration with the deal management systems that dealers use to submit deals for management approval. Trade-in appraisals cannot be conducted remotely through any channel. The vehicle requires physical inspection, and this is an operational reality that applies equally to CarMax, Carvana, and every other buyer of used vehicles regardless of their technology sophistication. Many dealerships have invested in digital retail platforms, including Roadster and Darwin Automotive, that allow complete online deal structuring, financing pre-approval, and trade-in estimation. Consumers who want a fully remote purchase experience have legitimate functional tools available that go considerably further than a text thread. The consumer who negotiates by email effectively arrives at the dealership with everything agreed in writing and spends the in-person visit on document execution and vehicle inspection, reducing the experience to its necessary components. Demanding to negotiate via text and then claiming bad faith when the dealer prefers email is confusing the channel for the conspiracy. Email works. It has worked for 20 years. Use the thing that works. 66. You added a cosigner with excellent credit to your application and expected the interest rate to reflect that cosigner's profile as though their score replaces yours in the underwriting calculation rather than supplementing it in a process that evaluates multiple variables simultaneously. Lender policies on cosigned applications vary by institution. Some use the higher of the two credit scores as the primary rating factor, which benefits the primary borrower, while others use a blended assessment or require both applicants to meet minimum thresholds before advancing to rate determination. A strong cosigner reduces the lender's default risk assessment for the application, but it does not eliminate underwriting scrutiny of the primary borrower's income stability, employment history, debt-to-income ratio, or the loan-to-value ratio of the vehicle being financed, all of which are independent risk variables that affect the rate offered. The vehicle itself is an underwriting factor. A loan financing 120% of a used vehicle's actual cash value presents a higher lender risk than one financing 80%, and that risk is priced into the rate independently of what either applicant's credit score says. Used vehicles, particularly older or higher mileage units, carry statistically higher default correlation than new vehicles. Lenders price this vehicle level risk into rates as a category-based adjustment that applies regardless of borrower credit profile. Captive finance companies affiliated with manufacturers often restrict promotional rate programs to primary borrowers who qualify independently, meaning the cosigner improves the approval probability without changing the rate tier available under those specific program terms. The consumer strategy for a cosigner situation is to use the arrangement to secure approval on terms that might otherwise be unavailable, then work on building independent credit history so the next transaction doesn't require one. Expecting a cosigner's score to automatically deliver the best rate available is expecting a character reference to produce a lower mortgage rate. It helps at the approval stage. Underwriting always involved more than one piece of paper. 67, the dealer sold your vehicle, the transaction closed, time passed, market value shifted, and you'd like the selling dealer to contact you proactively with information about what your vehicle is currently worth. As though the completed transaction created an ongoing financial advisor relationship with monitoring obligations that survive the exchange of title and keys. A completed vehicle sale is a closed transaction. The dealer's legal and service obligations are defined by the warranty, the purchase contract, and any executed service agreements, and none of those documents create an ongoing market value monitoring obligation that extends beyond their specific terms. Vehicle market values are driven by macroeconomic factors including fuel prices, interest rates, supply conditions, and consumer preference shifts. Forces the dealer has no control over and no responsibility for communicating to previous customers as they materialize. Gap insurance, which the dealer presented in the finance office, is specifically designed to address the financial risk of a vehicle's value declining below the loan balance. Customers who declined that coverage made a documented choice to bear that risk themselves, and the market movement that followed is the consequence of that choice operating exactly as the product's design anticipated. Manufacturer CRM programs send owner communications including trade-in offers and value assessments as marketing outreach. These come from the manufacturer's database, not from dealer-initiated financial monitoring, and they are promotional tools, not fiduciary services. The concept of ongoing duty the customer seems to be reaching for, fiduciary obligation, applies to licensed financial advisors managing client assets under defined advisory relationships, not to retail sellers who complete a one-time transaction and have no further contractual connection to the asset. Online tools including Edmunds, Kelley Blue Book, and Car Gurus allow any owner to check their vehicle's current estimated value in under 2 minutes at no cost. The dealer sold you a car, they didn't adopt you as a financial dependent. The transaction ended. The relationship ended with it. 68, you purchased a certified pre-owned vehicle, treated the certification as a guarantee of indefinite reliability rather than a documented assessment of condition at a specific point in time, and arrived at the service counter confused that a used vehicle with accumulated mileage required maintenance attention within the first year of your ownership. CPO eligibility requirements vary by manufacturer but consistently include maximum age thresholds of 5 to 7 years and maximum mileage of 60,000 to 80,000 miles. Vehicles that qualify have already covered a meaningful portion of their expected service life before certification, and the program certifies that they met defined condition criteria at the moment of inspection, not that they will operate indefinitely without the normal maintenance requirements of a used vehicle. The CPO warranty is a defined contract with specific coverage terms, exclusions, deductibles, and a finite coverage duration. It is not a blanket reliability guarantee, and it covers listed components within the coverage period rather than promising zero maintenance costs. Where items are universally excluded from CPO warranties across every manufacturer's program. Brake pads, tires, wiper blades, air filters, and similar components are expected to wear with use, and are the owner's maintenance responsibility regardless of CPO status, exactly as they would be on a new vehicle. The multi-point inspection that CPO vehicles undergo is a pass-fail assessment against defined minimum thresholds. A vehicle with brake pads above the minimum acceptable measurement passes inspection and will reach replacement threshold within a predictable mileage range depending on driving behavior. CPO vehicles command a documented price premium of 3 to 7% above non-certified equivalents, according to Edmunds data. This premium reflects the warranty benefit and the manufacturer's reconditioning investment, not a transformation of the vehicle's fundamental age or mileage. Treating a CPO vehicle as basically new is like treating a renovated older house as a new build because it passed inspection. The bones are what they are. The warranty covers specific things within specific limits. Both of those facts were in the contract. 69. You discovered a mandatory arbitration clause in your purchase contract. You've declared it an illegal removal of your constitutional rights, and you intend to challenge it in the very court system the clause is designed to redirect you away from. A plan that requires ignoring approximately 100 years of federal arbitration law and a Supreme Court jurisprudence that has consistently expanded arbitration enforcement in consumer contracts. The Federal Arbitration Act, enacted in 1925 and codified at Title IX of the United States Code, declares arbitration agreements in commercial contracts valid, irrevocable, and enforceable. This is a nearly century-old federal statute with a legislative history and a body of Supreme Court precedent that renders the "this is illegal" argument one of the most thoroughly rejected positions in American contract law. The Supreme Court's ATT Mobility versus Concepcion decision in 2011 significantly strengthened mandatory arbitration clause enforceability in consumer contracts, preempting many state law challenges that had previously provided some relief in specific jurisdictions. Arbitration clauses are enforceable unless a court finds them procedurally unconscionable, meaning the buyer had no meaningful opportunity to understand or reject the clause, or substantively unconscionable, meaning the terms are so one-sided as to shock the judicial conscience, standards that are difficult to meet when the clause appears in a document the buyer signed with counsel available. The practical consumer move, which consumer advocates uniformly recommend, is to cross out the arbitration clause before signing and ask the dealer to initial the deletion. Many dealers will proceed without it, and those who won't reveal that the clause is a condition they consider material. Consumer organizations, including Public Citizen, have lobbied the CFPB to restrict arbitration clauses in automotive contracts, which is an active policy debate entirely distinct from current legality. The clause was on the page. Crossing it out was always an option. The pen was yours. 70. You tipped the salesperson during the negotiation, or brought coffee, or formed a personal connection over 40 minutes of conversation, and you believe this investment of generosity created an obligation for that salesperson to deliver pricing that their management structure, their commission system, and their approval authority do not permit them to unilaterally produce. Automotive salespeople are paid on commission, a percentage of front-end gross profit, a flat minimum commission on deals below invoice, or a hybrid salary plus bonus structure. And their compensation model creates no pricing authority independent of the desk manager who approves every deal before it advances to the finance office. Pricing authority in a dealership sits with sales management, not with the salesperson. The manager sets the floor the salesperson can go to, approves exceptions above it, and the salesperson functions as the customer-facing advocate for their side of the transaction, not as an autonomous pricing agent who can reward personal relationships with unauthorized discounts. A tip given to a salesperson mid-negotiation is a gesture that the salesperson receives personally and appreciates genuinely, but it has no operational pathway to the management approval system that determines whether your price gets accepted. Building genuine rapport and being pleasant to work with can motivate a salesperson to advocate more persistently with their manager for your preferred terms. This is relationship influence, which is real and worth cultivating, but it is distinct from a contractual obligation that money or kindness creates. The most documented pathway to a better deal remains unchanged across every market condition. Research the vehicle's transaction price, obtain competing quotes from multiple dealers, demonstrate willingness to walk away with a competing offer in hand, and negotiate the out-the-door total rather than the monthly payment. Expecting a better deal because you tipped the salesperson is expecting the grocery cashier to mark down your cart because you were friendly at the register. They don't set the prices, they never did. Your kindness was appreciated. It was never on the pricing committee. 71, you swore off dealerships entirely in favor of private party purchases because dealers are imperfect, the experience was frustrating, and somewhere in your assessment of the situation, you decided that eliminating the professional retail layer would remove the problems rather than replace them with a different and less regulated set of problems. Private party sellers are not subject to the FTC used car rule, state dealer disclosure requirements, or the mandatory buyer's guide display. A private seller has minimal legal obligation to disclose known defects in most states, and the as-is nature of a private sale provides fewer consumer protections than even the most stripped-down dealer as-is transaction. Financing a private party purchase is structurally more difficult than dealer-arranged financing. Banks and credit unions offer private party loans, but at higher interest rates than dealer-facilitated transactions, with stricter vehicle age and mileage restrictions, and without access to the dealer's network of 10 to 20 competing lenders who bid against each other to produce your rate. No warranty, no CPO program, and no implied service relationship exists in a private party sale. The buyer absorbs 100% of mechanical risk from the moment the title transfers, with no recourse path that resembles what even an as-is dealer sale provides. Title transfer in a private transaction is the buyer's responsibility. Verifying clean title, confirming no outstanding liens, checking for salvage or rebuilt designations, and handling the DMV paperwork all fall to the buyer rather than to a licensed dealer with a surety bond obligation. Private sellers frequently price vehicles using KBB private party values that run 10 to 20% above dealer trade-in levels. The assumption that private is always cheaper doesn't survive contact with a seller who also read the KBB article. You just sat through 71 complaints, at least one of them was yours. Drop the number in the comments and tell us which one you still think is valid, because some of you will finish this video and walk into the next dealership absolutely certain you're being robbed. That commitment to being wrong is genuinely impressive. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.